Hey man, are you tired? Coffee's just not doing it for you these days. Let's talk about something different. Let's talk about cacao. Cacao comes from the theobroma plant. Broma means food, and theo means, well, God. So why aren't more of us talking about this godlike food source? Packed with antioxidants, polyphenols, theobromine, which is like caffeine but without the jitters, healthy fat, low carbs, protein, magnesium, calcium, and the highest plant source concentration of iron known to man. Why aren't we consuming this stuff every day? Well, you can. Our partners at Cora Cacao offer ceremonial grade cacao, sustainably sourced, plant to paste from fair trade farms in the Mayan motherland of Guatemala. Cora Cacao is committed to delivering cacao products to you at reasonable prices in a way that makes the world a better place for all involved. Whether you're making morning cocoa lattes, iced cacao, hosting a meditation ceremony, or just doing alchemy in your mom's basement, Cora Cacao is committed to supplying you with the highest grade stuff for what you, your body, and your mind need. So head on over to coracacao.com. That's coracacao.com. Use promo code INTHEKEEP, one word, all caps, at checkout for 10% off your order. It's time to replace those bad habits with good ones, and using Cora Cacao for your energy and nutrient needs is a great place to start. I'm proud to call Cora Cacao a partner of In the Keep, and I hope that you will be proud to call them a new part of your daily routine. Much love. The half-wise, recognizing the comparative unreality of the universe, imagined they may defy its laws. Such are vain and presumptuous fools, and they are broken against the rocks and torn asunder by the elements by reason of their folly. The truly wise, knowing the nature of the universe as law against laws, the higher against the lower, and by the art of alchemy transmute that which is undesirable unto that which is worthy, and thus triumph. Mastery consists not in abnormal dreams, visions, and fantastic imaginings or living, but in using the higher forces against the lower, escaping the pains of the lower planes by vibrating on the higher. Transmutation, not presumptuous denial, is the weapon of the master. The Kabbalion.
I was born in Australia in a small country town, and from the outside, my family looked very normal. My parents were both professionals, and they were, just looked all very nice on the outside. There were horse riding lessons and tennis lessons, and we certainly weren't lacking in any. We weren't impoverished. We just, had family trips, and it was all going well until my mum blew up the family with an affair, and they went through a really ugly divorce, and which I got pulled into as a 12-year-old. I got my mother used me for emotional support, which was extremely damaging, and she also alienated me from my father, which at that time wasn't a criminal offense, but now it is. That whole parental alienation thing it's evil. It's what it is.
Yeah.
And so I got pretty messed up by the divorce, and I ended up left the town I was living in and went to university, where I studied to become a teacher, and I focused on outdoor education, like teaching climbing and skiing and hiking, and that was my focus. And through that, I met a man who became my first husband, he was also using outdoor adventure activities in the corporate realm
Mm.
to for team building and personal growth and development. He was riding that way. He was the first company in Australia to do that, and he also had a military background. He was the longest serving Australian soldier in the Vietnam War, and I only really found out that recently. This guy was so modest. He was a real warrior in both senses, as a on the ground warrior, and also as a spiritual warrior.
Mm.
So we started a life together, and he really opened my mind to a bigger picture, because my mother, in addition to being she was had narcissistic personality disorder, and she was an alcoholic. She was also a devout atheist. So she really poisoned me against an idea of a higher power. In fact, she had me believing that anyone who believed in God or was religious was basically like a lower class human being, just a complete idiot.
Right.
And so I sort of grew up with this superior attitude until I met Barry, and then we had some quite extraordinary spiritual experiences together. We did meditation retreats, we did shamanic journeying, we did tantra work together, and that really opened my mind, like I said, to there being more to life than's perceivable through the five senses.
Right.
And
How old were
so
you when you had that opening up experience?
it was in my like mid-20s.
That
I met him when I was 24, and so from 24 on, that's when I started to just have a lot more spiritual experiences, and that became more of my focus, actually, the
Yeah.
inward journey.
I think a lot of
And
people have that sort of quarter life moment. It's about
yeah,
25 up to 30 that people who are set in that same mindset that you started off with, which is that anyone who thinks anything that you can't measure with a ruler or a compass doesn't exist, right?
right,
So yeah,
exactly.
okay. So from there,
And well, we also have our Saturn return at 28.
yes,
Right, which according to, like, the, Rudolf Steiner, who teaches about how there's certain, I suppose I'll just call it degrees of embodiment that happen in times of our growth, like at 7, and then, 28's another one, and
yes,
so, yeah, that was a profound time for me too. It's also when I gave birth to my son when I was 28, so, big changes.
mhm,
And also, I also wanted to live on a farm and be as self-sufficient as possible. That's always been one of my dreams. So we were doing that. We were setting up the place to be able to approach self-sufficiency. Anyway, he went off to work one day. It was the first day of a big job with an Australian telecommunications company. And I got a knock on the door about 10 o'clock in the morning from the local cop and a neighbor to say that he'd been found dead in his car. And I knew in that moment that my best friend was dead. My dreams were dead of my any dreams of a family or a future or life on this that self-sufficiency was gone,
mhm,
completely gone in that moment. And then I was living my nightmare of being a single mother, which I always had dreaded. And I was 3 months pregnant with our second child, so that was just an added hell. I really didn't wanna live anymore. I actually would've, if I hadn't been pregnant, if I and been childless, I would've checked out right then and there. It was just too painful, just too horrible. But I felt that I couldn't really do that because I had children, so I went on a years of looking for, um, just like a reason to live, or somewhere that felt like home, or, like another to redefine my life.
right,
And I took several trips to India and, tried to figure shit out basically, and ended up living in a small town outside of Melbourne called, ironically, Healesville, where I did do a lot more work healing I knew I was wounded from, well, not only the grief that I was experiencing, but from my childhood. So I continued doing different types of healing work, like rebirthing, which is breath work that brings up stored or like suppressed emotions.
mm,
I did some more shamanic journeying, and I did this course called Dying to Live, which was basically a preparation for a, a death, like what do you call it, simulated death, like a guided meditation of a death experience. And so in that week, we were blindfolded and we were in silence for most of the time, except when we came together as a group, and then we wrote our will, wrote our eulogy. wrote letters of forgiveness and prepared for this death experience, which was on the Friday morning, and I had a massive out of body experience that I've never had anything like that before. But I met some beings that included my husband who'd passed away, and one of the Indian teachers who I had, and I got some direction about what to do, and that's when I was guided to start some training with this particular individual who I'd known as a trance channel. Now, a trance channel is someone who opens themselves to another consciousness and then allows that consciousness to use the vocal cords and the body to speak.
Yes.
So he was doing that, but he was also a trained actor. Let's just get that out of the way. This guy was a big fraud. All this is information that I've found out since, of course, because I thought I was meeting my guru and starting my, training with him. And I ended up going to America, where he had his ashram slash cult, and that's where I started training. I had my children with me, and we lived as a community in Southern California with him as the leader of the group. He also uh, believes that he's the second coming. He's the Maitreya, the Kalki avatar, the one to come and save humanity, and we're all his disciples to help him with his mission. But he's basically just a very evil, like sex addict, pedophile who has a serious, narcissistic personality disorder, as well as a whole lot of other psychopathy. And we were basically living in hell for that time. He was big on punishments and big on making people feel like shit. And particularly, he honed in on my son and my daughter, but not the. We had a child together, so she was a word like uh, worshipped, literally worshipped, but the other two were made to worship her. There's so much sick shit going on, and after 7 years, my son came home from school one day, and he was clearly upset. I suggested he go to bed and we'll talk about it in the morning, and in the morning he was gone. And I knew something was wrong because that's so out of character with him, and we reported him missing by the end of the day. And then the next day, my ex, the cult leader, sent his assistant to look around in the like the hill behind the house, and he found his body with a neck wound and a fucking kitchen knife, and blamed the whole thing on me. Told everyone that I hadn't given him the life that he wanted. I'd been disobedient, and I wasn't following what I was supposed to be doing with my life, and that wasn't giving him the opportunity to live his life. So he took himself out. Apparently, he was also gay, which is another heinous lie. Like this cult leader outed him at his funeral, and it was just an absolute nightmare at this point. And I knew that this was not something I wanted to live through. But once again, I had children, so I went to see this gentleman who'd been the cult counselor for many years. In addition to having these meetings with the cult leader, and we had partners we're supposed to meet with in house meetings, also supposed to go and see a counselor. But I never went. Yeah, I was pretty disobedient actually, but it was just the hypocrisy was just nightmarish. So I went to see this counselor, and when I walked in the door, he said, "I knew you'd come and see me. You're in a cult. You know you're in a cult, don't you?" And I said, "No, I don't know I'm in a cult. I thought I was in an ashram with my guru." And he said, "Go home and Google cult characteristics." So I went home and I Googled cult characteristics, and there's the charismatic leader who's the arbitrator of truth, who controls everybody's everything from what they eat, when they sleep, where they work, how they use their time outside their work, where they spend their money, who they're in a relationship with, how much sex they have or not have, just every aspect of life was controlled. And then there's the gaslighting, which it's a term that comes from a 1930s play where the protagonist makes his wife feel like she's going crazy by adjusting the brightness of the gas lights that we used at that time to light. Well, that happened every day. Like, he would lie about conversations we had or didn't have, or send me back because I got the fruit that was not ripe enough from the supermarket. Just so much like level of control of me and, well, everyone really in the cult. And then there's the brainwashing. We had to repeat his name. We had to get up at 4 a.m. and supposed to chant his name 108 times and sing to him and have photos of him and kiss his feet and make offerings to him, just like he's God. And so when I saw the list of these tactics that cult leaders used, they triangulate people. So they set themselves up as that's what happened in my family. My mother made my brothers and I sort of enemies, and that's the same thing that happens in the cult too. And once I saw the list of cult characteristics, I knew I was in a cult.
Right.
No one ever told me that whole time I was in a cult. No one. It was mentioned within the cult, and we would laugh about it and say we were the only cult that wasn't a cult, something like that.
Right.
There was, but no one told me, even though I found out my parents went to see a cult expert within a year of me leaving Australia. I don't know what advice he gave them, but it was the wrong advice because from my experience, if no one had ever told me, I it would have taken a lot longer for me to get out, because when you don't know you're in a cage, how can you get out? If you can't see the prison,
Mm.
then there's no way to escape because you're not looking to get out. And I see this, just as to jump forward, I see the same thing happening on a global scale, really, to humanity. Most people cannot see that there is a cage, that there is a perception, deception. There are control mechanisms that are being used to keep us like limited, believing that, this is all there is to reality. And that was happening to me in the cult. I did not see that how I was being controlled until I understood that's what was going on.
Sometimes
So
it
then
takes seeing the microcosm to like even be able to conceive of what the macrocosm looks like, and that makes sense that you would have this experience that you've gone through. You would be able to see patterns that other people are not going to see because you've lived through it. Um,
exactly, that's exactly what happened. Once I got out of the cult,
yeah,
I could see that was a microcosm of the macrocosm of the cult that's playing out on humanity. That's exactly what happened to me.
yeah. So
So it I
let's just. I got a
yeah,
few questions to make sure I'm caught up here. How old are your kids when you moved to America?
they were, 5 and 7.
Okay, so younger children, and then how many years go by that you're part of this organization before your son passed away?
7,
Okay, so he
and
was
then it took me
14, roughly
yeah, he was 15,
15. Okay, all right. I think I understand.
when he
Kind of.
was murdered.
It
Yep.
just the story passes by so fast. I just need to make sure I understand like how many years are going by. So had you as a kid, even before any of this happened, ever heard of a cult or, like, known about, Jim Jones or the Manson family?
I'd probably heard of them because right from a young age, I did have a fascination for, um, just things like that,
Mhm,
cults and, true crime. I've had a fascination for, but it wasn't until I got out that I really started studying cults and cult leaders. In fact, that's been part of my healing, is to really dive into other cult leaders
mhm.
and, their tactics, their MO, and there's a lot of them. There's
Yeah,
so many more being exposed now, all and not just religious cults either. There are, the way that political parties operate, that's cult behavior. Like even World Championship Wrestling, that fans of that act like they're in a cult.
but
There's
the
sports teams.
the Macho Man Randy Savage on my wall there from World Championship Wrestling. You're right.
Yeah, you might
You're
be
right.
Nicole, the World Championship Wrestling. They're they're multi-level marketing, they're,
Mhm.
like my family was, a cult
Sure.
with my mother as the cult leader, and then there are relationships where you've got one person who's the cult leader and the other person who's the cult follower. So those tactics to keep people controlled can take many forms other than just a church or a actual what we know as a cult leader.
Oh, I understand what you mean. It was one of the I knew a lot about this stuff, right? Like, I grew up deeply fascinated with cults because I think I told you in my email chain, my mother went through a very, very similar story to what you're telling me now. Um, Throughout her adolescence, like, her mother had gotten involved in the cult, and then all of the children were thus involved in the cult. And it took until she was, in her late teens before her and a lot of her friends were able to escape it. So I was keenly aware of this stuff, and then when I was 20, I joined the military, and I started seeing all the same patterns. Like, I thought I was gonna go crazy. I literally had to buckle down, and I think for the first 2 years that I was even in the military, they put me on Prozac just to keep my mind from going insane, from thinking about all of the different layers of, like, manipulation that were going on all the time. Standing in a formation of a bunch of people who were screaming together, "Warheads on foreheads," and clapping and cheering made me uncomfortable because I knew that that was the same patterns. This is brainwashing. This is cognitive dissonance happening in real time, you know? I had friends who were volunteering to go back to Afghanistan to pay off their car. You know what I mean? And I'm like, like, think about the risk reward for the amount of money that you're getting out of this. I had friends who would cry at night after they closed down Kabul Air Force Base in Afghanistan because that's my home. I've been there 6 months out of the year, every year for most of my adult life. A lot of these guys were literally crying at the loss of not being in that war anymore. So that that level of social manipulation, not I'm not even saying necessarily anything negative about the military, it's just that seeing the signs and patterns of a controlled society, period. Go to a socialist country right now, and you'll see the same things. Even in our capitalist, United States, you still see cults of personality everywhere, all the time, and whether that personality be a person or a brand. So you're right. Have you ever watched the movie They Live with, Roddy Piper?
No, I've only
Mm.
seen clips of it.
Yeah, but you get the concept. He has these magic sunglasses that allow him to see through all the BS, all the bullshit marketing. Everything is just clear to him what it really means. Go out, procreate, work, pay your taxes. Like that's it. That's all they want from you. So
Right.
yeah. So let's back up to you. So when you get out, what happens next?
Well, just I'll say that on the getting out, I didn't get out straight away. It's not like I
Okay.
packed up my gear and left because he was still, blackmailing me.
Right.
In a couple of he wouldn't let me leave because we did have a child together, and according to the law, I couldn't move more than 2 hours away, and he was also on a spiritual level telling me that, it's been tens of thousands of lifetimes that we've been working together to get to this point of being a family, and, uh we were here for a specific purpose, and if I turned my back on that, I'd scream. My screams would reverberate throughout the universe once I left my body or whatever. So I understood that there was that I was a soul here for uh, a, a purpose. I just had to like sever that idea that that purpose was somehow to continue on with him.
Right.
And then I think my best understanding of how I did actually get away was he let me go because he knew if he didn't, he would have another death on his hands, and he would've. So he let me go to Hawaii, and that's when when the healing started, where I could finally just take a look at what the fuck happened to me. And
Right.
I'd already had some understanding of, narcissistic personality disorder, so I studied that more because it that's and you definitely that's what he has. I mean, someone who's claiming that they're freaking the second coming has clearly got a narcissistic personality disorder and a whole lot worse than that.
Sure.
But instead of just pointing the finger at him and saying, "Well, he's a narcissist," you know, he, whatever, I had to look at, well, what does that mean about me? Why did I get into a relationship with someone with a narcissistic personality disorder? And what I came to understand was that I had codependent tendencies, and both self-love, codependent tendencies and narcissistic personality disorder are self-love deficit disorders. So
Sure.
both, we there's a lack of self-love, which is pretty much underpinning so many of the problems. But anyway, the manifestation in me was that I looked outside myself for approval and reassurance and love, and whereas he created this false persona, narcissists create a false persona, and that's how they get their needs met, by getting other people to believe in their lies and give them attention and money and all that sort of stuff. So I understood that I had this self-love deficit disorder, and I better repair that. I better learn to love myself. And he wasn't my last narcissist, but I eventually got to the point I had to get really, really serious with myself and just say, "That's it. No, no more getting into any relationships until I've really established self-love." And that took a lot of work. It's still a work in progress, 'cause it just not having that established, it not ha as a child, not having needs met and feeling safe and feeling loved. It's not just me. I mean, it happens. Most of us go through childhood and we come out wounded in pretty major ways, really. But I had to establish self love, and I did that through like repeating I love myself and just treating myself more kindly. And I spent a lot of more time in nature, just walking on the beach, swimming in the ocean,
Mhm.
hiking, lying on the grass, and that time in nature really started to change me. In fact, that was the most profound, um, like, leap in my healing, was once I started staying directly connected to the earth. So I'm barefoot most of the time, skin to earth, and just receiving the earth energy because it's a magnet. We're electromagnetic. We have a very, subtle vibration, but that can get disturbed really easily through all the electromagnetic frequencies we have around us. And so the way that we can come back into balance and our nervous system can be rebalanced is by being grounded. And I really needed that because I just fried from my experiences. So stayed connected to the earth, spent a lot of time in the ocean, and I started sun gazing. So every morning when the sun comes up, I just receive that sunlight into my eyes. It's the highest form of information, life optimization information that's available to us. So by receiving that through the eyes, it goes into the brain, and I don't know how it works, but I know it does. I know that it's transformed my consciousness, expanded my consciousness. I've been able to receive a lot more information, collate a lot more information. I've just published a book that's like a distilled information. It took me years to write, but it's it's such a beautiful offering of basically just reminders of how to be human, because that's being so i- quickly forgotten when now people are just relating to life through screens rather than through the natural world.
Sure.
So, yeah, my main healing is coming through learning about like, a lot of the natural medicines that are available to us within our body and within nature and within our divine nature. And in addition to learning more about what's happening on a global scale to humanity, and understanding this, there are systems of control that are in place that, like we talked about before, are keeping us basically in a cult where uh, we are mind controlled, we're sickened, and so many people are suffering because of it.
Mhm.
There are ways out. And that's one of the things that I like to talk about, how
Yeah,
to free oneself from suffering, because I don't suffer anymore. I still get sad and angry, and I have those emotions, but I'm not suffering from day to day anymore.
I I have to imagine that in order to replace kind of that hole in your heart that causes codependency, right? You described sort of cycling through relationships quickly after that, because I think it would be hard to trust anyone, narcissist or not. Like, even to just have a trusting relationship with someone, even if they're in many ways good to you, right? you're gonna be, reacting to something that's no longer there. I mean, that's the definition of post-traumatic stress, right? Is like the thing that causes the trauma is no longer present, but you're still experiencing that yourself. I personally have a lot of, let's say experience with that feeling. So, I mean, just like going through your day to day without having someone there to tell you what to do all the time. Like when you're first set free and you don't know what to do with your time anymore. You had the kids with you, I assume. So did that keep you grounded? Having to be present and take care of the child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That definitely, kept me, like, grounded, yeah, for sure, because
Mm,
I had to make sure that all their needs were taken care of.
mhm,
There was something I wanted to say about trauma there. I can't remember, it'll come back to me, but,
mm,
yeah, I know what I was gonna say. The trust was problem was with myself. Like, how do I trust myself? I already made stayed in this, like, toxic situation that was ended up where my son died. I made all those decisions. I stayed every day, how do I trust myself? How do I forgive myself? How do I, move forward from feeling like a fucking piece of shit?
right.
And it really was being in nature and feeling that what nature is offering is love, is life force energy. So feeling loved, even just going outside and that's particularly easy to do here in Hawaii where the air itself feels like it's giving healing energy.
Sure.
And it's being in nature that's helped heal my heart and restore my trust in myself. Yeah.
Mm. You talked about, just walking around without shoes on, connecting with nature, connecting with earth and everything. And I think about, isn't it interesting that one of the number one tells of civilization, right, where people are moving in uniform under the guidance of a hierarchy, is that they wear rubber-soled shoes. Like, if you were living in a neighborhood amongst other normal, quote, unquote, people, and your kids walk around barefoot, that's one of the first things they're gonna point out is like, "Oh, that's like that person's poor, that person's an idiot, that person's stupid." Um, and I think that's very fascinating, even if it's by accident, not by design. Just the fact that rubber, which is like a perfect insulator for electricity, is between you and the earth is like the first cutoff where you're potentially more easily manipulated.
Exactly.
Mm,
It's all by design. There's a graph that shows instances of I think it's diabetes that in correlation to when rubber-soled shoes were introduced, which I think's in the '70s. It's basically just you know, it's just exponential increase
mm,
because being disconnected from earth energy is one of the most disempowering things that can happen to us. It's the same with people who live in cities, up in high-rise buildings, or even in cities themselves, really, because you know, there's not that much opportunity to connect directly with the earth, although concrete is, conductive.
mhm,
So, that standing on concrete, of course, going to parks or gardens or whatever, and touching trees, that's a grounding thing. People often bitch about not being able to touch the ground because there's snow, but touching trees, touching rocks, touching crystals, all these things are grounding and they're essential. There's no way we can have optimal physical or mental health without having a direct connection to the earth as often as possible, like pretty much every day. We have to be connected to the earth. And you're right, there is a judgment on, people not wearing shoes being somehow less than or, you know, poor. But
mhm,
really that's it this is something that I learned when I was writing my book, that we have as many nerve endings in our feet as we do in our hands, like
mhm,
they're just as sensitive. So if we're encasing our feet in, shoes all the time, then those nerve endings aren't being stimulated in a way that they would be if we were walking bare feet on the earth. So
right,
not only are we not getting all that sensory information, electromagnetic information or new um, electrons,
Sure.
Not only are we not getting those, but we're not stimulating all those nerve endings on our feet, and so therefore that's less, like, neuron stimulation in the brain. So it keeps us basically, like, limited. Just that simple one thing of wearing rubber-soled shoes all the time and not it's so disempowering, and it's interesting that that's not something that even I listen to a lot of, like, natural health doctors, and they mention grounding and they mention, like, the importance of sun gazing, but it should be drilled into people that there needs to be time spent outdoors every day, bare feet on the grass, lying on the grass,
Mm.
just and getting sunlight. It's essential that we otherwise we just compromised and we will be sick and we will not we will not be able to experience life optimally just with those two simple things, grounding and sun gazing or just being in sunlight.
No, I completely agree with you. I was lucky enough to just grow up in the woods. That was just my childhood, was just we live basically in the forest and fields and go outside and play and all that stuff. So I I got lucky, but then it wasn't until I'm gonna say, like, my early mid-20s that I really got into this whole video game world, talking to game developers and working with game developers, um, and one of the key things that you notice is that there's a whole society of people out there who basically just live on the internet inside of an apartment. Like, I know people who don't go out, are so socially awkward, like, they don't even leave their apartment other than to just, like, buy more food and toilet paper, I guess, and then they come back and, there are people who fully prefer, or at least they think they prefer, I should say, to sit, at home with VR goggles on and live in that digital world than to actually, like, go outside and just be a human being at all. And transhumanism, all that stuff, I was reading where in your article where you talked about, homo technos, and it's interesting because it's
Yeah,
real. It's
it
it's
is real.
happening all around us. Um, but noticing how, how much these are people who, reasonably at least well to do enough that they could live that life of leisure, spend all their time on the internet, right? So that's the first tier. And then secondly, like seeing how unhappy they are, how much they suffer.
Yeah.
And I think that art is a reflection of your soul, right? So just all of the dystopian, violent stuff that comes out of the video game world, which I'm not against that existing as an art form, don't get me wrong. And I'm not saying that anyone here is violent, but the negative things that you think about when you're, living in a negative world or not living in the world at all as much as you can, separating yourself from the rest of humanity creates a lot of very interesting things, psychologically.
You're listening to KEEP in the Keep. Please take a moment to tell at least one other person how much you enjoy the show. That's right. Grab that link and send it to that buddy you're thinking of who you know would be interested in what we're talking about right now. Maybe post it somewhere. I know it seems scary, but you can do it. I believe in you. Don't hesitate to leave a comment and a 5-star review, a like, wherever you're listening. And if you want, Patreon supporters for this show get episodes early, access to our secret Discord channel, chances to suggest questions to our guests, our games, and whatever else I can do for you. Every little bit helps. This podcast directly supports my ability to do what I love and take care of my growing family. The link is in the show notes. Thank you, bless you, stay in the Keep.
So I'm wondering, from your perspective, having this idea that you need to, completely dedicate yourself to the earth, or at least be grounded with it as much as humanly possible. When you're looking at someone who's, living that way, what are the signs that you see that they're, the the symptoms that you would cross off and say like this, and that causes you to think that way? What causes people to, to be so disconnected?
Just it's being disconnected from nature.
Sure.
That's so unnatural. It's so inhuman. It's completely disempowering. It's
Mm,
sickening. And no wonder people end up with, living in very dark worlds with dark thoughts. And, yeah, I don't really know people who do that. It's interesting. I'm sure you come in your world, you see that far more often.
Mhm.
I am my understanding too that we're also got 2 generations now. 2 generations of people who relate to life more through screens than through the natural world. Even if they're not locked up in their bedroom and playing games or whatever, they're still carrying their device around and referring to the device before they give their attention to
I know.
the outer world, and that's terrifying. 2 generations of people who are techno humans,
Do you
basically walking
remember
around.
arguing with someone about the name of an actor in a movie or something like that, and you just never get further than the disagreement, right? Because you couldn't just pull out your phone and presto, bring that information up, right? What does that do to the human brain? Like, we have not really had time to figure this out, but, for most of history, a disagreement was just a disagreement, and you didn't have God in your phone to settle the argument.
Yeah, it atrophies the human brain.
Sure.
That's what it does. It atrophies our creativity, it atrophies basically our humanity. That's my argument. I'm sure that there are ways that these technologies and AI can be used that aren't, detrimental to ourselves individually and as a species, but most people don't have the wherewithal to understand what that means, especially if you've got no point of reference outside of the life that's on the screen and with AI. If you don't, appreciate the kiss of the wind on your cheek or the twinkle of the sunlight on the water or the hum of the insects at night, we are humans in human bodies as well as being spiritual beings, so we have to give our bodies what they need in order for us to have this optimal experience of life. And that doesn't just happen through a screen and through our minds. We have a whole world, inner world, and an outer world to explore and embrace. And that's just so limited when it's all happening through. We're not even getting the right light into our eyes. We're just getting this screen light, this blue light, and that doesn't optimize brain health. That doesn't expand consciousness. That we don't get to move enough. We don't get to, talk enough to and read other people's faces and, smell smells and eat nutritious food. There's so many ways that just by living life devoted to these screen technologies is creating a race of, cyborgs. Basically, that's where we're heading. That people, like my partner says, he works in construction, so he sweats for his money. Is well, the last of the dying breed of people actually doing stuff, whereas everyone else is just like creating content. But how all like online trading or whatever the fuck site, what's it called, cryptocurrencies or whatever. I mean,
Sure.
that might be an alternative for government, like overreach when it comes to money or even just currency at all. It's an alternative currency, a way of trading or whatever, but it's creating this just an army of people who are online even more. Like,
No.
how is that actually contributing to individual soul evolution or evolution of humanity? And that's fine if that's your personal choice, but it's from from my understanding, it's not contributing to the freedom and future of humanity. In fact, it's the opposite. I would argue it's the opposite. It contributes to there are more people just withdrawing themselves from society and not bringing forth their fullness of themselves, their creative genius. Whether that's in whatever it is. There are so many ways, but I think that we're being manipulated, stifled, and controlled while believing that these technologies are, oh, they're the latest advance. Then no, they're not. They're actually purposefully designed to enslave people. That's my opinion.
Yeah, so I can understand how one arrives at that conclusion, and not really here to argue with it so much, just to present the other side of the coin, right? Where there are tons of people who more or less kind of agree that we are the sex organs of the machine world. Like, we are just here to serve whatever comes after us. Like at this point, technology has evolved out of humans, right? And they're prepared to make the argument that is the natural thing that's happening. Like no matter what we do to try to stifle it, it seems that we're just moving in that direction as almost a law of physics, you know? Um, and then the question comes like, well, without technology, I mean, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation, and technology going all the way back to the first, you know, proto-humans that banged rocks together to make a spear or a hammer or whatever, uh, has just naturally been the course of who we are and what we do as a species. At some point during the Industrial Revolution, I think a lot of us could argue that it was like psychology, sociology, and industrialization all kind of happened at the same time. Before that, we'd had a long stint as an agrarian species. We were manipulating the land, plants, that kind of stuff, but we weren't disconnecting ourselves from the earth, so to speak. Then, you have a generation of people who are, at least in, the Victorian Western world, diving really deep into the intellectual side of humanity and diving really deep into technology, at an industrial scale. Then we have World War One, World War Two. Both of these are the first real industrial wars, where an entire country has to change its economy to fixate on what do we do to build the best fighting machines. Yeah, that's happening in Europe and in the States, and to a degree, the whole world by the 40s. And then the question is, at what point in time did, if this is the case, did the powers that be, the government, the shadow, whatever we want to call that, did they become aware and make a concerted effort to do this to people on purpose because it would make society better, or is it just happenstance? Like, did it just happen that way that we moved in that direction? So, it's really tempting for myself and for tons of people, yourself included, to just say it's on purpose that you're doing this. Like, and I'm not saying there aren't bad actors who do things on purpose, but the question is like, overall, is there really, you know, some dark room of people, with cigar smoke, you can't see their faces, laughing and talking about the next big plan they have to brainwash all of us to move in the right direction. But the science for that, like the cognitive science for that, existed at least as early as the 1920s, because that's when Edward Bernays came out with Propaganda, his book, and he was Sigmund Freud's nephew, so he really was, privileged to be educated in psychology that early, psychoanalysis, understanding how the mind works, at least to a greater degree than had ever really been done in the Western world before that, and then apply that to what we now recognize as marketing. I mean, the word propaganda, read the book, if anybody's interested, and you will clearly see this was not even meant as a pejorative term. This was like a brand new, crazy, awesome idea that he had that he thought would help the world. He thought that, like, oh, this is going to make it easier for people to buy the best stuff when they go online, or not at the time they weren't even talking about online. When they go to the store to buy a product, and our advertising for that product reflects how good it really is. He wasn't thinking about, or at least he wasn't writing about, selling people a bunch of crap they don't need. And then that was co-opted over time. So then you really don't see it used as a pejorative term until after the Third Reich fell. People started realizing what Hitler had done with Germany and how they had applied these same principles of what was published as like an informative self-help for entrepreneurs book. Those same principles are applied to, what if we convince an entire country that the Jews are evil and we need to get rid of them, and also we need to take over the world, and all it takes is some good marketing and some sexy looking Hugo Boss uniforms. I'm sorry that was a long tangent, but it makes you think. The stuff that you're pointing out, the patterns that you're seeing really, really make somebody think.
No, it's good that you've done that thinking and reading and all that. It's a good thing
Yeah.
to be diving deeply like that. Good for you.
Yeah.
And you're only young too, so that's an excellent thing to be doing with your time and your intelligence. I would argue that we as humans, we've been headed in this direction for a long time.
Okay.
even longer than I think even just looking at the existence of, like, kings and queens, that whole bullshit monarchy thing, like, somehow some way that you're born gives you the right to tell other people what to do. I think that, well, natural law, right? So natural law is the cosmic law, and that's been hidden from us, the way, that the the cosmos operates with these principles that are in effect at all times, and that there are people who've known that, the people or whatever, intelligences, I don't know, like, that's when people say, "Who are they?" or whatever, that the hierarchy that's controlling us, I don't know who they are, but they're there, that we are being controlled just because I can't give them a name or whatever. I do know that they're anti-human, subhuman, non-human, satanic parasites. They have known about the way that the cosmos operates. They've kept that from humans, and then they put in these, minions and puppets, whether they are the kings and queens or, even just to introduce government, you know, a system that tells people what to do and enforces that through fear and, fear of death or jail or whatever, those types of systems, when they were introduced, that's when this whole, like, push to control more and more of humankind and our evolutionary timeline, it has been going on for a long time.
Sure.
That's my understanding. And now we're sort of in the culmination of like eons of work. These beings, whoever they are, entities, demons, whatever you wanna call them, who are controlling things, they play the long, slow game. This has been in the works for a long time, and it's only now that the frequency of light has increased, which it has. The frequency of light that's coming from the sun and from the galaxies is now being measured at higher the, frequencies than it has before. The vibration of the Earth, the Schumann resonance, usually is 7.84 hertz. Now there's oftentimes when it's over 50 or whatever. So the whole vibratory frequency of the planet uh, is increasing. The light that's coming through the sun is increasing. We're getting more solar flares, more solar tsunamis, solar storms than we did in a much longer period of time. So the light frequency is increasing, and that means that everything that was existing at a lower vibration, in the fear and, you um like evil suffering type of realm that's being exposed for us all to see. So we're just now seeing more of what's been going on behind the scenes. So we're seeing more of the how Hollywood really operates. We're seeing more of the corruption in government. We're seeing more of the corruption in the police force and the judicial system. We're seeing how fucked the financial system is. We're able to see more of this, the way that we've been manipulated and controlled.
But I would make the argument that the vessel with which we see this information is largely the internet. Like, the evolution of technology to create the internet, where we now have these conversations and expose all of these things and can communicate in real time. Like, an Australian lady living in Hawaii talking to, me in South Carolina, you telling me this story is really, operating on the infrastructure of tech. So I'm just hesitant to say that technology itself, you know, is anything but a tool. And then it does make it easier for, the spirit of the devil, Satan, the trickster, God, and Leland Yankees fight in the heaven, whatever this is, at a cosmogenic level. It does make it easier for them to encroach and to control and manipulate, but at the same time, the forces of good are able to use the same tools to spread information, to spread ideas, to have conversations that, I mean, if you lived in the wrong country at the wrong time would get you executed for just bringing up, talking about monarchies and kings and stuff. It's like, oh, you've insulted the king, off with your head. We're sitting here in a free enough world where we can criticize the leaders of countries and reasonably not expect to be murdered for it. So that alone is like huge progress, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I see so much of this life is a paradox, right? So we do have this technology that it allows us to access information and people and ideas that we never would have been able to access before. Yet, in that same way, influences of, more of a demonic type can easily come into our lives. That's, that when people who give their children a computer, they're not so much as giving their children access to the outside world, but they're giving the outside world access to the children. And unless we have that awareness, then
Mm.
that we're just open to being manipulated and lied to. And
Sure.
yeah,
I mean,
but it does.
the
You go.
forest is dangerous, right? But
Yes,
at
yes.
some point, you have to tell your kids, "Okay, you're ready to go into the forest because you know what it looks like, you're prepared for it." So it's not like you just take an infant and shove them out there into the wild and say, "Whatever happens, happens," right? Ideally, if you're a good parent, you prepare them for that journey, and then you don't say, "Never ever go in the woods." So I feel the same way about, like, computer like, I just had a son, and he's not gonna get any of this stuff until I think he's educated enough to recognize when someone's trying to take advantage of you or, just something as simple as don't click on a link that doesn't have a secure, you know, web handle or something like that. But most people, I mean, the vast majority of people who are interfacing with this technology are like, you know, someone flying a plane who's never been trained to do that. And they're just left to, you're on one hand, you're free to make mistakes, and on the other hand, you're free to get yourself into a whole world of shit that you don't wanna be in, and
Right,
feel like
and
you can't get out.
I think that most people don't really realize that they are being manipulated in some ways, and not I mean, even with the television. That's the most one of the most powerful mind control devices there is. That's why it was developed. The whole reason why it's called programming is because of that, and still people don't even acknowledge that. I know a lot of people are now turning away from television just because they recognize that the mainstream news is just full of lies and propaganda, but
Right.
still not accepting that the machine itself is designed for mind control and for brainwashing. It just is. And then there's the same for that basic information needs to be given about the computer screen or a cell phone too, that these are tools of control. And it's up to us to be educated about that. And then, like you're saying, ways to use the technology so that we aren't mind fucked.
Sure. I mean, in every scenario of conflict, like, technology is almost always the deciding factor, first and foremost. Like, before you talk about strategy or even numbers, I mean, we date human evolution, at least in the past few centuries, by, like, the Stone Age to the Bronze Age to the Iron Age, and because the simple difference between a copper weapon and an iron weapon is enough to dramatically change the outcome of a conflict.
Mm.
And now, as you very eloquently stated in your Substack article, and I believe this is from your upcoming book, that the new weapon is information. Like, now we're having information warfare, and
Yeah.
I don't think that the right so many people react to this, and I used to think this way, and my friends would lecture me ad nauseum. It's like, you can get up, tr throw out all your electronic devices, get in a Winnebago or something and go live out in the forest if you want to, and just disconnect from everything, and that might feel really good, but that doesn't stop the conflict from happening. So the better thing to do would be to get all the same access to the same weapons as you can, and just be present for the conflict, and try to outweigh whatever's coming on the other end of it. So, like, something like AI, and I know you have very strong opinions, we can talk as much as you want about that too, because I'm open-minded, but I would just say it's happening no matter what at this point. So, unless we figure out a way to go unplug the machine, I think we want to do our best to make sure that it's raised to be a good kid instead of just allowing the bad guys to raise it alone without our input. Does that make
Yeah, I
sense?
agree.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll definitely. We definitely need parents, and thank you for taking your role seriously and raising your children to be human,
sure.
firstly, good humans. And then who are connected to nature and the natural world and their intuition and their, their family. And then 'cause it really is the to be able to navigate these technologies takes I mean, takes a lot of, like, work, a lot of intellectual ability, and to just throw a child in front of a screen it I don't know how to even I don't even have a word for it, except that it's really fucking lazy parenting and gonna end up with some children who really just don't even know how to relate to the world, don't even know how to negotiate relationships,
Mhm.
and, um and then if you're concerned about your spiritual evolution or evolution as a soul, it's not gonna happen through these technologies. As a spiritual being, our growth and evolution happens through expansion of consciousness, but also happens through the body technologies that we use, like our breath or our movement, or it's like chanting and sounds that we make. So we need these natural technologies rather than the artificial technologies in order to be able to evolve fully. Like, they help us. These other screen technologies give us information, but unless we're embodying that information and like working with that information, what are we? Just like, if you just imagine a cartoon, we're just like a little tiny body with a great big head
Mm.
full of all this information. That's not really that's not really a very balanced way to go through life. It's not all about just what you know. It's a lot about, what you do and who you really are as a person, how you show up in the world, what contribution are you making?
Yeah.
And and the fact is we can do so much of what these technologies can do. We just don't really know who we are or what we're capable of yet. Like, we can access the Akashic records, for instance, which is a record of all things all done through all times, done by all people throughout forever. That information is accessible to us. We don't need ChatGPT. There are ways for us to access higher information. And we can write, we can plan, where there are things that we need to be able to do as human beings, as divine creative beings, that these technologies are stealing from us, stifling within us. So anyway, I'm sure I'm not going for a world that's completely devoid of any artificial technologies, or computers or whatever. I'm not advocating for that at all. Just to be aware of how disempowering it can be, and especially for children who don't know about the beauties of the natural world. It's very limiting.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the earlier kind of scenario that I was talking about with, these gamers, programmer type folks who, or just people who are internet junkies, they're like sort of addicted to it. And then most of the time when I talk to the people who I think are the ones who suffer the most from this, I'm like, well, when did you first have a computer? And it's always like almost universally, these are kids who were they'll tell you themselves, like, I was raised by the internet. My parents put me in front of a computer, and then they ceased to be involved, right? They were just working or doing whatever it is that they were doing, and all of my friends were online. And they learn, from, in some cases, early childhood, just this is the way to connect to the world. And on one hand, I think I'm glad that they have a way to connect to the world, because otherwise they might have just sat at home alone. But then the question is, what would you have done with that alone time? Maybe you would have read a bunch of good novels and, been on some adventures outside or whatever. I imagine, like, we don't think about this as much as, you came from probably the most high ratio of land to people that there is in the world, really. Um, but, someone who grows up in like Tokyo or Seoul, or, even New York City, and they don't have a choice. Like, they're in this circumstance where they grew up in that space, their parents aren't moving, and there almost is no access to the world. Like, even to just go like, even just going from New York City into Central Park to touch grass is like, it's artificial. Everything about that is contrived. The entire country of the Netherlands, there's, like, not a spot of land that's just natural land. Everything has been sculpted and scaped by people. I can't even stand to live in, like, a small city because I need to just go out and see trees. Or else I feel crazy. I've done it a few times where I've tried to live in a concrete jungle and it makes me miserable. I mean, everything about my life just falls apart as soon as I'm not connected with nature.
It's true for everyone. Most people just don't realize that's what's the problem.
Mm.
And
Um,
did you
no,
have more to say about that? I was
no.
gonna say there are ways to bring nature indoors if you can't get out for whatever reason, uh, and that includes putting lots of plants around, uh, playing the sounds of nature. When I lived in the city, I would play the sounds of breaking waves or running water or birds chirping, insects, whatever it is, and, also dolphins and whales and that sort of thing, because those sounds help our body, to relax. And I'm just gonna go off on this tangent for a sec. Being relaxed is one of the most powerful states we can be in, because when we're relaxed is when healing takes place optimally, and also when we can receive whatever it is we need to receive from, if we're lying on the grass or breathing the clean air or whatever, we receive the optimally when we're relaxed. So, uh practice relaxation, and that doesn't mean scrolling on a cell phone, just seriously lie down and be completely relaxed. Be, aware that you're open to healing, and then also be grateful for whatever it is that you're receiving. So the sounds of nature is another, like, back to that again, indoors. And then you can use aromatherapy. So you can diffuse essential oils, whether it's pine or frankincense or whatever, but that's another way to, help the body, um, heal and restore.
Mm.
Drinking the purest water that you can find. It's not tap water because that's usually got fluoride in it. But if there's any way you can access spring water, like take a drive and go and get that, because it's really important to be drinking the purest water possible. You can leave it out in the sunlight, and then it gets, its in vibration increases, so you can drink the water that's got a higher vibration. You can pray on it, bless it to its highest vibration, and then eating living foods. That's another way to be part of nature. So grow your own sprouts. That's an easy thing that everyone can do, and just eating a handful of sprouts every day, you get that living life force energy. So there are a few simple ways that anyone can do to bring more nature inside or into life to help, um, like, just to help from living in these very unnatural worlds that we live in now. From just even living in a box, that we all live in boxes. It's really important to be out living or breaking free from that box in as many ways as possible.
For the guy listening who's, eating flaming hot Cheetos and drinking Code Red Mountain Dew and hasn't been outside in a week and hasn't talked to a girl in years, um, the idea that you're presenting of is so easy. Just, grow your own sprouts and, like, you can just surround yourself with plants and you can just just not do anything. No phone, just sit down and think alone for 5 minutes a day, right? Sounds like insurmountable. Like that, it's crazy as that sounds to you and me that's all just simple stuff, right? To someone who's so disconnected from nature and they exist where I'll give you an example. When I first met my wife, uh, I showed her a picture of some onions I had just picked from the garden, and she's like, "What are those green things on top of the onions?" And I'm like, I realize, okay, you've never seen an onion that didn't come from the grocery store ever in your life. So you think that these 2 vegetables are different plants. The green onions and the onion bulb itself, you don't even recognize that they're the same plant. And times that by a million for a lot of people. Think about the amount of people who are eating, like, microwave Tyson chicken who have never interacted with a chicken in their life. Maybe never even seen a chicken in person. And if you live in the middle of a giant city, that's very real. That you may have never, you eat a steak, you don't you buy ground chuck and you don't know where on the cow a chuck is. Mm. That's how far removed they are. And so and just being addicted to constant input, from whatever they're listening to or reading or doing or, scrolling through something for a dopamine hit. Like, 5 minutes without doing that is torture to them. It's like, "Oh my how do you even do nothing?" Like, I can't just do nothing, and I'm not even making this up. I mean, real mental health crisis of, I can't just do nothing. Like, you go into a panic attack the moment that you have to just be alone with your thoughts. This is every day, all around us, all the time at this point. That's how far gone it is.
Yeah, I you're so right. I try not to think about the facts that you're talking about, because I know that's really is the case for a lot of people. A lot of people, are so disconnected and really so far disconnected that, uh, I don't know. I would just pick one, just do one thing,
Sure.
one beneficial thing, and to me, that would just be go outside. Just stop looking at the screen and go outside and look at the trees, look at the clouds, look at the ants, look at just, spend some time up, like, not looking at a screen. I think that's the have to be where to start with that.
What do you think, were some of the things that from your experience in the cult that when you look at the world now, specifically, it's like, "This happened to me, and that's what it is at, the bigger scale." If you could give some, like, clear examples of where it's happening.
So I was able to see that what happened to me in the cult in terms of those, tactics that the cult leaders use with the controlling of uh, what food is eaten, what you do with your time,
Mm,
how you, um, uh, like, make choices for who you're going to, spend your life with and spend your money on. How I could see how those sorts of control mechanisms were being used on humanity. We are controlled as to how we live our life. That whole 9 to 5 work routine thing, that's a whole system of control. Like, who says that we have to live like that? Who says we have to work 5 days and have 2 days off? There's no time for anything when people have that work routine. Everyone's just so buggered. They do want to come home and vegetate out and there's no work for no time or headspace to think critically. There's just wanting to check out basically from that grind.
sure.
So I could see how that work routine is just like what was in the cult. Like, there's no time for thinking outside the box. You just got to follow along. Then there's you get uh, become a debt slave where you take out a loan. Not that there's anything wrong with borrowing money or whatever, but most people are indebted either through student loans or house loans or whatever. So that keeps people in a slave system where you do have to get up and go to work and do that grind.
Sure.
I could see how the
A mortgage
peop
is indentured servitude to the mortgage company. You're signing away your future income, a huge percentage of your life, and a lot of the decisions you're going to make financially on a mortgage statement saying, "I'm borrowing money from this bank, and
yeah,
I owe you for 35 years," which is no different really than, my ancestors, like Irish people coming to America and then literally signing themselves into indentured servitude for years so that one day they could earn citizenship and be a free man.
yep, that's right. It's just another aspect of the control system.
Sure.
And then there's the food system's controlled. So now most people are what's on offer in the supermarket, most of the supermarket is ultra processed crap. It's poison. It actually makes people sick, causes all sorts of chronic illnesses, and doesn't give the brain the nutrition it needs to think clearly or operate properly. So that's another, that whole the uh, s- food in itself is being used as a weapon to keep us controlled, keep us sick and suffering and limited and small. Then there's the whole government in itself, which is slavery, right? No one's got the right to control anyone else. Not to say in an ideal society we wouldn't have some uh, like organizational structure, but it's not going to be pyramid power down if you don't participate or agree or whatever, you're going to be punished. It's going to be more egalitarian. So the political system, the divide, it's the two-party system. So you're either this side or that side. So people are always fighting and warring. But they're really just the same. They're the same part of the same team, and that's the team technocracy. The team enslaved humanity. They just present this bizarre circus on the outside that gives people the idea that they're making a choice, that they can actually have an effect on government, whereas really, no, you don't. It's all selection. It's all just a stage where you've got bad actors and uh, the Hegelian dialectic in full swing, and that keeps us divided and conquered.
You brought up
And that,
pro wrestling earlier. I just wanted to make this analogy. When I was first, I was sitting in Europe talking to some people there, and they were asking me, like about what was going on in our politics. And at the time, I don't remember what exactly it was, but I just tried to explain to them like this, because people think like, you need to vote, you need to do this, you need to be participating in that. And the best analogy I could give them, I was like, okay, look, American politics works the same way that WrestleMania works. Like, Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant are pretending to fight on the stage. And then when they're done, they're going backstage and they're cracking open a beer together, shaking hands, saying, good job out there. We really had them convinced. And they both make money. And the company makes money. And you were fooled by the performance. And that's really more. I'm not saying that, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump were high-fiving afterwards. But I am saying that at a much larger scale, the two parties in America are the same party of, this is the billionaire ruling class. And then we're the rest of them. You see what I'm saying?
yeah, I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think it's just all a big show, an evil clown show.
Yeah.
So that's the whole government thing, right? So everyone's in fear of the government. So everyone pays their taxes, which is really theft. Because that whole idea, like who's going to fix the roads, that's all just garbage. This taxation system they're already millionaires. They don't need the fucking money. They've got all the money that they want. It's only designed to keep us impoverished so we don't get ahead. So we do have to keep paying them. I mean, obviously they're using the money for whatever they want, which is usually nefarious shit. But really, the whole taxation system's just to keep us impoverished.
If you want to know how fucked tax money gets, just at a small scale, like go work for the federal government for any period of time. And just for me, being in the Air Force for 6 years, seeing how money gets wasted alone, without even considering all the black budget shit we do and all the weird government agencies that we're spending billions of dollars and don't understand, omitting all of that, just seeing how, like, at a squadron level, they make decisions like, let's make sure we don't lose our fiscal income. So by the end of October, we need to buy $30,000 worth of shit that we don't need. And then so we're going to buy standing desks for all the computers in our office. And then they don't get used because they're not even the right size. And then they shove them in a, locker somewhere, like a warehouse. And then later, when somebody wants to use them, like, oh, you can't because that's reallocating government funds. This was spent on that, so we can't sell them to you directly. There's laws against that. So you're just wasting now warehouse space on making sure you don't get a smaller budget next year because you didn't spend your total budget. When in fact, you could have spent it on putting lines in a parking lot or child care for the people who work here, anything other than just blowing it all in the last 3 weeks of having money. Just that, and then extrapolate to the size of the entire military industrial complex. That is how money gets spent. And then extrapolate that out to the entire rest of just the US government. And then if you think that's inefficient, go look at what they do with, socialist money and how crazily that gets spent. And I'm not saying it's worse or better, but it's equally as screwed up, because now just instead of the free market deciding Well, the government just gets to make every decision, and they have no incentive whatsoever to limit their spending except how much they have to tell you is coming on tax day. In Denmark, they're smiling while they get taxed like 38 to 50% of their money on everything. They're like, we live in the happiest country in the world. We also live in the highest rate of SSRI prescriptions in the world. Like, we all have access to healthcare, which is giving us this medicine that makes it easiest for it to accept that we're not free.
Right.
You know, and there's layers of that. But my question, I'll always come back to is it on purpose or is it just happenstance? Like, is there really someone pulling the levers on this, or is it just the failures of a market?
No, there's definitely a force that's directing our evolution in a um, in a certain way.
Mm,
It's not human nature to be, to be. It's not my human nature, and I'm sure it's not your human nature to be mean and unkind and enjoy watching people suffer and know that there's enough money to take care of people, but not wanting to do it. It becomes more obvious every day that there is evil afoot, because otherwise there wouldn't be that money wasted. Otherwise, governments really would act in ways that are for everyone's benefit, not just for the benefit of the few. We wouldn't be seeing these bankers' wars. We wouldn't be seeing the chemtrails. We wouldn't be seeing the pharmaceutical drugs poisoning people. We wouldn't be seeing people being brainwashed by television if there wasn't these evil forces acting upon humanity, because it's not in our nature to be cruel. There's and to enjoy watching people suffer. There's an evil force that does run through some people that allows them to act in those ways, but for most of us, our nature is to be good and kind and caring and want other people to be free from pain and suffering. That is our nature, but there's another force, an evil force that's defiling humans.
sure.
And I can see able to see more and more evidence of that as, like I said before, as the intensity of the light goes on in these, um, whatever they are, they're groups of people or leaders of heads of government or celebrities or whatever, but how they all really are working together for uh, the the detriment of humankind, not the upliftment, not the evolution, but the enslavement and the devolution of humankind. And before I started talking about some of the systems that are in place, we've got the education system that's in place. For God's sake, what a just an absolute fucking nightmare. That's just publicly sanctioned child abuse from the get-go.
Mm,
From the get-go, like, children are taken from their families at a really young age and put into these institutions where they're brainwashed and their brains are filled with shit, and they're not really learning anything that's useful about life, not learning how to be human, not learning how to grow food, prepare food, not learning how to do basic, like, car repairs or, just not learning basic shit of how to be human, but instead of this other garbage, and then spat out the end with some, idea that you've gotta be a 9 to 5 debt slave for the rest of your life. That's the education system. So people are born in a box, live in a box, educated in a box, work in a box, and think in a box, and that's all the education system. Then they watch a box, right? That reinforces it all. And so there's so little opportunity for people to realize that, oh, there is a box. There is this box that we're all living in and supposed to just accept. And then you've got the religions that just adds into the having people live in fear, and
sure.
fearful people are easily controlled. So if you're thinking that, you're gonna burn in hell or whatever, you're not gonna be living in life fully, and that's the sin. Those religions that put fear in people when really there should be no intermediary between us and our higher power or our intuition. No one belongs there. No other being, just straight direct connection to source. And everyone has that ability. Everyone can listen to intuition. We don't need to be controlled and manipulated and made fearful through religions. And then there's science, and science has just been totally just destroyed by, you know, special interest groups.
Mm,
So now experiments are done and they're all funded. So what? I don't know what's happened to science. It just seems to be, another way that we're manipulated to believe certain things about the way that reality is or the way that we're supposed to be.
You're listening to KEEP in the Keep. If you love this show and you love supporting indie video games, please take a moment to check out In the Keep's upcoming Stellar Valkyrie. Built in the GZ Doom engine, this retro first-person shooter puts you in the universe of space bird bounty hunter Falco, who is on a mission to save his ex-girlfriend from the evil Black Star cult. Just type birdgame.space, that's BIRD game.space into your browser. Hit enter, smash the wishlist button, and stay tuned.
So anyway,
Yeah.
I believe that all these systems that are in place have been put in place by some force, some intelligence, some entity,
Sure.
some groups of beings or whatever, and they are designed to take us away from our birthright as being sovereign beings. So we're here to live in peace and harmony and abundance with each other and with nature, because that's what's available here. Like, we have enough resources, we have enough land, we have enough wherewithal, money and all that for everyone to be housed and fed. Everyone on the planet. No one should be suffering from any lack of food or housing or shelter. And that's how I know that are evil forces in place, because so many people are suffering. So many. It's just heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking how many more people are living without homes, and how many more people are addicted to all sorts of substances. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's heartbreaking.
At the same time, um, I would there's a guy named Gad Saad, he's I think a Canadian college professor, but he had published recently a lot of work on what he calls suicidal empathy. So you were talking about earlier how it it's it's almost always a relationship in a cult between a narcissist and someone who is codependent or extraordinarily compassionate, right? So, like, the more empathetic and compassionate you are, the more trusting you're gonna be and allow someone to potentially take advantage of you. You're always gonna think the best, "Oh, everyone's good, everyone's nice, it's flowers and unicorns. No one would ever wanna hurt anybody. I'm sure he has his reasons," all that stuff, you know? This is, like, as old as Adam and Eve, like, the dichotomy of, you know, empathy and then or I should say intuition and logic. So, like, for a young mother, the natural inclination when you hear a baby cry is to give them whatever they want. And it's the role I'm not saying these are the only 2 gender roles in the world, just archetypically speaking. The role of the father is often to kinda coax towards independence, and the goal of 2 parents ought to be ideally to turn out an emotionally stable, smart, and, independent adult who can think for themselves and interface with their feelings. And too often, people are we're on that spectrum that's not exactly in the middle, right? So, ideally, you want 2 people raising a kid to represent both sides of that polarity. And that's something I think about a lot because, of course, the mother of my child, my wife, is the most profoundly empathetic, sweet, caring person in the world. But then you could argue, like, maybe kinda easy to take advantage of because she's like she'll let someone go to the nth degree of, "I'm gonna help you, I'm gonna help you, I'm gonna help you," and at a certain point, it's like, okay, if you keep your kid from, uh, being able to fall and skin his knee, he's never gonna learn not to do that for him, to just deal with that himself.
Mhm.
Um, and so the allowing I would say this is just overall on the left side of politics right now, we have this insistence on being super aware and empathetic and caring about everyone else's problems and issues and the little things that make them uncomfortable and not want to participate, etc. And trying our best to make life easy so that you don't have to suffer with all these things. On the opposite end of that spectrum is like, you know, omitting the billionaire ruling class, just like how people, everyday people feel is like you're over here worrying about, some kid in another country who can't eat. What about the motherfuckers who are mining coal in Kentucky that can't eat? Why can't we deal with this? And you're telling me I have to bend over everything about my belief system and how I, live my life or whatever to conform with somebody who I don't even know's problems, right? I think that's overwhelming. Like people aren't meant to evolutionarily, we've never had to think at this scale. If you were a serf in a kingdom, uh, you might know who the fucking lord of the land is. And then everything above that is just a bunch of whatever. There's a king somewhere who lives in a far off place I'll never see and never hear, that's not a reality in my life. So we would just interface with things at the scale that we comprehended. And it made us easy to take advantage of, but it also made things more bearable because you're not, it's like you said earlier, if you're not aware of the jail that you're in, you don't even know you're in a jail. And then as soon as you start seeing the size of the jail just exponentially increase every new question you ask about it, it's traumatic to, I think, a normal person's human brain.
Yeah, it is traumatic to a normal person's brain. That's why most people don't want to accept that there is a lot more going on that's not being presented through the mainstream media. Even that belief that if it's not in the news, it's not happening. Like really, I would think we'd be so far beyond that, but we're not.
Mm,
Um, I remember when started to conceive that there was actually nefarious shit going on from the government. They're not my friends. They're actually manipulating things to like that whole scamdemic thing. There were people who just don't want to accept that that level of corruption goes on because it really does require a complete breakdown of one's worldview. Right,
sure.
so everything that you believed in, all who you trusted in, what you've been taught, all that to actually start accepting that I've been lied to. This is a lie. This is all just a, a fucking fraud.
Sure.
It, to accept that takes a lot of courage, and most people don't want to do. They'd rather accept uncomfortable lies than really go after the truth. Because
Even
it's scary as shit when you realize that you're
yeah.
being lied to and manipulated. Because who can you trust?
I think the scary part is, trying your best along the way, not to slip into the mindset that everything is I'm not even saying it isn't. I'm just saying that if you start to, look for patterns, you'll see it everywhere and then it could drive you crazy. So for me, um, I was a weather forecaster in the Air Force. I think I know a lot about climate, weather patterns, etc. Then recently, someone was kind of confronting me about geoengineering and the whole idea of, like engineering the climate and the idea that, the government is doing this with chemtrails and there's the HARP system heating up the ionosphere to control and steer hurricanes into North Carolina and all this stuff. And so in order for I'm not saying how I feel about it because I don't know how I feel about that. It's just a interesting thing that I am inclined to say that's a bunch of nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. I've never seen anything that even suggested that that could be the case the entire time I was in the Air Force. I've never seen a plane able to do what you're saying but then people come to me, they're like, "Well, there's patents for these kinds of devices. This isn't normal, what we're seeing on this satellite image," all that kind of stuff. And just simply for me to go from, "That's a bunch of horseshit nonsense and I'm not even gonna hear you out," to, "Okay, what if I allow this to be true? What concessions do I need to make within my own mental framework to to even be open-minded to the possibility that this could be happening?" And it's like, at the level of I have to think in order to believe in geoengineering that every single day of my entire career in the Air Force doing the weather was a total sham, and that everyone else around me was convinced too, and that somebody was so clever that they hid all of this from us and no one ever noticed the pattern. And that's a lot to give up. I'm not saying it's not something I can't shed. I've shed a lot of ideas, that I found out later to be wrong or, I needed to be more open-minded about or whatever. but just that level of reconsidering what I believe is so hard. And I know that there's a bunch of people out there listening, to your story, and they have their arms crossed and they're saying, this would never happen to me. I could never be manipulated like that. But then they just what they often don't realize is like, oh, you are right now, and it's so good you don't even realize it's happening to you.
I know. I've had that said to me. How could you get in a cult? And what I'm thinking in my head is you were in a cult
Sure.
right now. You
Yeah.
just don't know it. Yeah, it's true. That is true. Yeah, I think it's important to keep that open-mindedness about I do that too about what I'm learning too, because new information does come, things do change rather than holding on to these fixed ideas that we got taught in school or whatever that get reinforced by the television. It's important to be open-minded and prepared to analyze information as it comes in rather than just accepting it or not accepting it. I remember I when I first heard the term conspiracy theorist or whatever, I then learned that that was actually a term that was introduced by the CIA at the time of the Kennedy murder because they were trying to throw people
Sure.
off the trail of the truth. But I also this is another here we go on this tangent too. I also believe that whatever is the force that's controlling us
Mhm.
is is a uses black magic. We're dealing with demonic forces here that use black magic, and one of the ways that black magic gets used is through language. So the term conspiracy theorist or conspiracy theory itself is entrained so that when people hear that, they will immediately stop any further investigating into the truth, and they will actually stop critical thinking at that point. They'll just throw out that term and that's it. They won't go any further instead of saying, "Oh, let me take a look at that." Just like, no, conspiracy theory and just dismiss that information. So that there are many more examples of how that we're being thrown off the trail of truth or just kept in the dark where the truth gets obfuscated and changed and uh, in ways that we don't really have much clue about
Sure.
until you start looking.
If words aren't magic, why do we call it spelling? That's what I've always wanted to know, and
Right, right.
it's absolutely true. And hypnotizing people with words, with images, with whatever keeps them distracted long enough for you to continue doing what you need to do while they fight amongst themselves. Is one of the things you described in the organization you were a part of was pitting people against each other so that they're too busy fighting amongst themselves to even focus on who's manipulating us.
Right.
And that's yeah,
It's a very
100% true.
effective strategy.
Even in the military, you'll have the Bravo, Alpha, and Charlie units are all constantly competing with each other, and we're gonna meet up and have the squadron football game between our different groups. In the Air Force, we call them flights or whatever, and then the commander gives you a prize when you win, and it's like, on one hand, that's good. We should be getting out, getting some exercise, having some healthy, friendly competition, but like, what are we being distracted from? Like, and the fact is that, like, okay, well, you're all on 12-hour shifts right now, because we're gearing up for this thing, and it's probably not gonna change anytime soon, and the pandemic's happening all at the same time, so we know you're fucking miserable, and you're probably thinking about ending it all. So we're gonna organize a barbecue for the company, and we're all gonna play softball together for a Sunday, which, by the way, you have to attend. I know you wanted a day off, but we can't do that for you either. And then people are just, like, showing up and be like, "Oh, I'm so happy that we could just have a beer on a Sunday. It's so great." And I'm like, "Yo, I just wanna be at home with my family right now." And we're all sitting here fucking saluting this flag and, all this doing all this common courtesies nonsense, pretending like the, lieutenant colonel that we work for is some kind of fucking god. And not to say I even have a problem with that person, or even that that person realizes the level of bullshit that they're interacting with, but it's just that level of cognitive dissonance is so disheartening especially when you have the sunglasses on and you see it around you. So, yeah, it must be really, really difficult, I would say, for your person who's working their ass off, maybe 2 or 3 jobs, 9 to 5, and then, evening shifts or whatever just to pay for, like, your kid's medication. And then, suggesting like, "Well, why do you need to work 40 hours a week? Why do you need to do that? Why do you need to participate in all these different things that it's set up for you?" And to them, they're just so caught up in that trap. Like, I can't even imagine being, if I needed to spend the time I need to go out and think about life and, like, go to some other place or even take a weekend in the woods, I would have to take off work, which means I'm not gonna be able to afford to put food on the table. There's no getting them out of that except to, potentially uproot them. Flint, Michigan with the water crisis, like, "Our water is terrible, we can't drink it," and I'm like, the first mistake that we're making here at the ground level is continuing after all of these decades of them promising to fix this problem that they're gonna use our tax money to fix that problem, because it could have been fixed. I mean, if we can put a fucking man on the moon, we could fix somebody's water. So the best thing for these people, unfortunately, is probably, like, get up and fucking leave. Like, start walking somewhere where you can just go to a fresh water source instead of continuing to sit there in this trap that you're in, letting the government feed you poison water and not do anything about it and promise you they're gonna do something about it and still not do anything about it. But to tell someone on the ground level, "Yeah, you should," the best advice I have for you is, uproot everything, leave your home, go somewhere else, which usually only happens for, like, spiritual journeys. Like, the Mormons did that, but they didn't really have a choice because they were, being chased out. And the Pilgrims who came to America, etcetera. It's like, it's always gotta be something really big that changes your whole mindset of how the world works in order to take that kinda risk.
Yeah, it's evil genius.
Mm,
The the intelligence behind all this, like, enslavement of humanity is evil genius. Everything works so brilliantly to just mind fuck people and keep people in the a state of ignorance and suffering. Yeah.
what do your kids think of all this?
Oh my god, that's a whole another sad thing. So, my daughters have both, alienated me
Mm,
as a result of the brainwashing that they received about me from when they were young. They were told that I don't even know you need to use the words to describe it, basically that I was a crazy bitch. And so they've chosen to live their lives without me, which has been excruciating. It's just basically like I have, it's been like 2 more deaths really. So I don't really have a relationship with any of my children. And the
mm,
the thing is I know people would judge me like that I'm somehow a bad person, and I've done wrong things, I've done bad things, but geez, I did everything that I could to give my girls, what I believe was a good childhood, right from natural births, lotus births, no, vaccinations, Waldorf school. So I really put my heart and soul into it, but it didn't work out for me, the whole parenting thing. It's been a source of, like, my greatest pain. I wish them well. I know what it was like for me to live, my life with a fractious relationship with my mother. It was not fun at all. So I hope they're doing well. It was a decision that, yeah, it was very evil and cruel in the end.
mm. I'm sorry to hear that. What are the things that they believe that you did wrong?
Well, that I got us into a cult that ended up, I know that's for my oldest daughter, I got us into a cult that ended up with her brother being murdered, so that was, my fault.
Sure.
And in
I
some
imagine
ways,
for
she's
her that
right.
makes it hard for her to trust your judgment in some
Yeah,
cases. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
So that yeah, it's been, like I said, it's been excruciating really, that I've had a lot of excruciating lessons that I need to, find a way through them.
Sure. I remember for me, I had a very similar thing. I have a great relationship with my mom now, but growing up, I had a really, really hard time trusting her, specifically her judgment. Um, sim just to open up a little bit, she was married several times. Like, after her and my dad split up, it took her 3 more times to make it stick, right? And for me, I was so used to seeing her just stand up for herself and walk away whenever anything got bad, that when she finally chose to, like, get through the tough times with someone, it shocked me, right? It made me it made me feel, and I think this is natural for a lot of young kids, like, "You're picking him over us," kinda thing.
Mhm.
And it took a decade probably to mend that disconnect. Whereas, like, now when I look at what she's been through and all of the circumstances that she had to get past in order to get where she is now, I think, okay, well, if I put myself in your shoes, I can't say I would have made different decisions. It's just that, from the perspective of a kid, I see you choosing to do something that seems irrational to me. But in reality, what she was trying to do is like undo years of pushing away relationships because she didn't trust anyone because she grew up in a shitty situation where it was easy for someone to take advantage of her. Um, but I didn't understand that until I was much older. So I
So
mean, go ahead.
was the when you, healed your relationship with your mum,
Mm.
was that as a result of work that you did on yourself to understand where she was coming from, would you say?
I would say both of us. You know, both of us had a lot of time, and when it was really when I became an adult and left home, right? Like, I
Mhm.
went off and did the whole Air Force thing, and had a lot of my own life experiences. Found out what it's like to be an adult and pay taxes, and manage relationships and all that kind of stuff, and have the space to think about, you know, when you're living your childhood, you're in it. But
Yeah.
once you're outside of it, it's like I can look back and compare and talk to other people. What was your experience? And the more wide experiences that you can hear about and learn about, I'd say the more open minded you become. And then on her end, it was like once the kids are out, once I'm away, she doesn't have to raise me anymore. She has time to reflect on the decisions that she made too. And she to this day still apologizes about like shit that that happened when I was a kid that I don't even think about anymore. But to her, it's like I feel like that was one of the things I did that may have sent you, a little awry, or in some cases a lot awry. Because I mean, I wasn't. I think I'm a okay, well put together adult now, but it took me till I was 30 to get there. Really, for a long time, I was struggling with a lot, and I think that her recognize like self recognizing some of the things that she did, and then me also being able to forgive and understand more about why, um, and have the empathy to say, like, "You are a human being too. Like, you make mistakes just like everybody else did. You were not very well equipped, you know, as an adult." Like, at the time that she had me, she had just come out of a life of not the kind of life that equips you to just know how to be a good parent, because she didn't have good examples of what good parents were. Um, Luckily, I can say to my kid, like, I learned a lot from that, and I learned a lot from my own childhood, and I'm gonna just do better with you. That's the best I can do. And hopefully one day he'll look back and say, like, "Okay, well, you could have done this a little differently in that, but overall you had your heart in the right place, and, thank you." That's my goal, at least.
Well, you've done good work.
Hmm,
You've done really good work on on yourself and then healing with your mother, and you will be a mm, a great father, and your son will be so, much better off from you having done that work.
sure.
It's really important to make an effort to reduce the multi-generational trauma that gets passed on from one generation to the next. So, thank you. It's a really important contribution that you're making to a better world through your relationship with your children. Thank
Yeah.
you.
There are relationships that are so toxic, you just have to cut ties with them, but I would say
Oh,
if
yeah.
if it's available to you, even if if you're a kid out there and you have a shitty relationship with your parents, even if your parents are really pretty terrible, it does a lot just to, like, set your own boundaries and decide how much you wanna go in at a time and how far you wanna let them get along, but try to understand them makes a big difference. I I think I was kind of cursed by, A, having access to all of human knowledge in my pocket, and also being a relatively intelligent kid, that a lot of my frustrations with my parents were centered around, I feel like I know more than you do. And I'm angry at you for not realizing this, whatever it is. So, I was having a conversation with my dad about the Bible, right? And just kind of unpacking, where are you at now with this? Where am I at now with this? And all that sort of thing. And I caught myself like getting angry at him for not knowing. I'm like, how do you not know about the Council of Nicaea? Like, how do you not know that perhaps John, the writer of this gospel, probably wasn't around when Jesus was around? How do you not know about the Gospel of Mary and all in the book of Enoch and all this shit? And he like blew me away because he's like, look, I want you to think about when I was a kid in the 70s, we didn't have the fucking internet, and the only information we got was like, we lived in a small town, right? So what our preacher told us on Sunday, what they taught us in school in the textbook, and whatever was in the newspaper, maybe what was on TV. That's fucking it. Like, you're coming at this whole argument, and you're judging me for not knowing all this stuff that you've just had in your pocket since you were 10 years old. And I'm supposed to just catch up with this all now as a 50-year-old man. It's not fair. Like, you're judging me from a point of view that doesn't make sense because I couldn't have been given the same amount of access that you did. And I wasn't even as naturally curious, like, people didn't have a reason to be naturally curious because there was no way to get that information unless you left your town and went searching for it. And it would take you a lifetime to get what we can now get in a nighttime of scrolling through Wikipedia,
Right.
or watching YouTube videos or whatever it is. And that blew my mind because I was like, you know what, you're 100% right. Like, I'm making you feel stupid on purpose for something that's completely outside of your control.
Yeah.
Um, and I think every kid could do well to just learn and understand the circumstances your parents were in when they made the decisions they were making. Even if your mom's a fucking, benzo addict or whatever, what led her up to that point in her life where she needed to numb her feelings every day in order to just live. And you don't have to forgive her for that, but you could at least understand it and not make the same mistakes yourself.
It's very wise words.
Mm. I'm sorry, that sounds like a really emotional, like, thing. We can move on if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, I've got, uh it's important for me to be able to talk about things that are uncomfortable and painful
Sure,
and probably judged in certain ways, but it's part of my experience, and, I've learnt that it's not uncommon. It's actually, I know personally a number of people who are my age whose children have abandoned them. And I agree with what you said that there are some relationships that are so toxic that it's best to leave them or go no contact.
sure,
I completely understand that. I actually had to do that with my own mother.
sure.
And uh, but there are other times too, like you're saying, I think as part of being a emotionally mature human being to learn to appreciate what it might have been like for someone else, what their life experiences was like that led them to make those choices.
What was
And
it? Maybe go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, you go.
What was it about your childhood that you think formed this initial sort of codependent latching system for you?
It was my mother.
Okay,
She was an alcoholic uh, and had a narcissistic personality disorder. So she didn't have the ability to love me or
sure,
love anyone. It's just it's not possible, even if they say that or buy your stuff or whatever. It, as as a child, I mean, not that I have a conscious memory now of not feeling loved, but I knew that I wasn't. I knew that I had to, do well in school to get her approval, or I could feel that her attention was elsewhere, and that was really on herself and on her, new relationship or whatever, and that really set me up for all the situations that I got into because I was looking to find that place to belong, that unconditional love, that approval, being told that I was beautiful or wanted or anything like that. I just didn't get that as a child.
Did Did your mother was she born narcissistic, or do you think that she developed narcissistic tendencies over
I
time?
think she developed narcissistic tendencies because her mother was even worse.
Sure.
My grandmother left. She never talked about anything other than what she was interested in, and she talked nonstop like a verbal stream of consciousness, and
Yeah.
she was basically the most self-obsessed person that I've ever met. She wasn't necessarily super mean or nasty or all that, but she was just self-obsessed
Yeah. I
and
know
very
exactly what you mean.
judgmental.
Yeah.
So, yeah, then that was my mother's mother, and then my mother was just doing what she knew to do, and that's to make it all about how you appear to the world and, to just get your needs met.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think the relationship a child has with their parents, especially their mother, maybe more so, really has a huge impact on who you're gonna be as an adult. Like,
Yeah, it's
uh
fun. That whole family, dynamic is fundamental to how we go through life.
sure. I mean, 100% of serial killers have a fucked up relationship with their mom, you know? And that says something a lot about,
Yeah, it
you know,
does.
where that comes
It
from.
does.
Empathy comes from your mother teaching you to be empathetic. That's hopefully the role that she accepts. And without that, you you grow to you I mean, the men who end up becoming serial killers, they grow to resent their mother, they hate her, and then she represents women to them, so that's why they victimize women,
Right.
because they're just looking at their mom the whole time. And this is, like, self-described, this is not me making this up, like, go listen to
No.
interviews with all of them, and
Yeah.
it's society
Y
didn't help me out starting with my mom, so why would I care about society? You're completely asocial, dissociated from reality, um and that's tough because, you listen to someone like Manson talk, and it's like, I'm inclined to agree with a lot of what he has to say. Or Kaczynski, the Unabomber. Like, a lot of his
Right.
complaints are valid complaints,
They are.
and unfortunately, they're just taking it out on the wrong people in many cases.
Well, like, wasn't Kaczynski, I think both Kaczynski and Manson were, part of the MK Ultra program
Yeah,
at
and
some point. Most of them are. They've been basically, conditioned or trained or programmed by government agencies to do what they did. I don't know why. Maybe they were all part of it, just to see what happens to the mind under certain conditions, or maybe they are training serial killers or bombers or whatever, which is probably more the case.
I think that it was an answer to the '60s, really, like, the the powers that be were trying to combat the free love, open-minded hippie movement that they were seeing, and in some cases with valid reason, like, we can't have, you know there's no such thing as free love. Like, if you could do that for a little while, and then eventually you're gonna have a generation of kids that were raised by teenage mothers with no father, and that's exactly what we got with Generation X. And there
Apparently that I've heard or read that that whole hippie movement was also part of the MK Ultra. It's all part of it. All that it was to break down the fabric of society,
Sure.
break down morals, break down relationships between, one generation and another. So instead of looking up to that other generation for respect, it's more, the opposite, in fact. So, yeah, I have heard that. Does make sense to me that it was all part of the same, all from the same, what do you call them, organizations
Sure.
for the purpose of, destroying society by, individually and as a whole.
That's a good place to leave off because I need to go to the restroom, and you can too if you need to. But I wanna talk about that and your black magic idea a little bit more.
Okay.
We'll be right back. So, yeah, what the puppet master, the hands above, even Nixon and even, you know, Stalin and Putin and Trump and all this stuff, like, what's above that in your mindset? Who are they negotiating with?
You're negotiating with non-human, subhuman, anti-human, satanic parasites.
Okay.
That's my best understanding of who they are.
How
And
you
they've had lots of
Go ahead.
There's lots of different names being given to them over time. There's lots of different names given to the different groups that they represent. There's the archons and demons and fallen angels, and but I don't know exactly who they are. That's part of how they operate, is that they stay invisible generally, and they just have their minions
Sure.
that take human form to do their dirty work. And they can too. I believe that they can take different forms. They're shapeshifters. They can present as looking human.
How would you know one if you saw one?
I would know them by their lack of warmth as a being,
Mm.
and probably their eyes would be dull.
It's an interesting thing about the human eye is that I think we all feel that we can see, the soul, the light, the spirit, the fire within through the lens of the eyes. Um, so this is obviously something you developed later because there was a point in time when I'm sure you were looking into someone's soulless eyes and thinking that you could trust them. So
Yeah,
how did you learn that skill?
by looking into people's eyes and learning their um, intent,
Mhm.
whether they're I don't remember when I learned that. I remember in the cult we had to do this exercise. It's done in other places too, called eye gazing,
Yep.
where you get to look into someone's eyes and keep looking and move through the discomfort.
A lot of acting schools do this.
Oh, they do?
Yeah.
That's probably where he got it from, because he
Yeah.
was an actor. Yeah, that that's an interesting exercise that, uh, that I've done a few times. I wouldn't actually now I wouldn't wanna do it anymore. I don't wanna do that exercise anymore. In the cult, what usually happened with those types of exercises is people would go into, like fits of crying and screaming, and it was actually really demonic. It was more about bringing demonic energy into bodies than exploring, you know, else's soul. It was more of like bringing demons in. And I know this is touchy subject for people talking about demons and black magic and all that, but it's real. It happens. It does. Just just because you don't know about it or it's uncomfortable or it's still going on, regardless of anyone's opinions about it.
No, I mean, it's like one tier above surface level investigating spirituality and religion. Like if you just look at it on the blank surface of things of just ignoring the esoteric and only, reading the basic stuff from each religion, you don't really get there other than like a vague story of, God and the devil or some form of duality.
No,
But
you don't.
if you go like one step deeper, it starts to open up. You start looking at the the actual institutions of purveying this information that exist, and how they have passed information down over time and the way that they obscure themselves on purpose. This has been
Yeah.
documented, and that could be
Mhm.
from a lot of different points of view. And it's really hard to tell who the good guys and the bad guys really are. But so when someone looks at the American dollar, right, and they see the pyramid with the eye, which is the eye of providence, right, and their first instinct is like Illuminati. Our government's run by the Illuminati. They're putting these secret, sacred symbols and stuff. It's magic. They're fucking with our minds, and it's because they're all reptile aliens and they're sucking the blood of children in a hot dog parlor somewhere or whatever. Some of that might be true, but on the other hand, it's like the access to that information is the real determining factor of like whether or not you have a magical power through symbolism. So just because you see the Eye of Providence doesn't mean it's the Archons. But the Archons know about that, and so do the Freemasons and the Order of the Golden Dawn and a lot of theologists and, all different groups of people, but they're just, they're like past spirituality 101 and have, I think, moved into that, you know, maybe master's program, if you will, of how to understand that stuff. And it's hard to like I said, to sort out the wheat from the chaff and the who's who. But
Yeah.
yes, there are dark forces. I don't think this is up for debate. There are definitely dark people out there who are, depending on what lens you come from, they're working for the black magician or the devil or they're demonic or they're any word you choose. They could be reptile aliens for all I know, um, who do use magic as we understand it to manipulate the world. And then on the same side, you have people who are also using that same magic to combat them. And this is happening around us all the time without us even really knowing that it's going on, unless we just look a little bit deeper. Um, but the power of symbols alone. We talked earlier about words and spelling, and a word is a symbol, and the symbols that we use to make a word are symbols, and everything breaks down into some sort of symbolic understanding of whatever's going on metaphysically above us. And understanding that just because you see something that you don't understand doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It just means that it's there, it's evident. And then you being able to determine if it's being used for good or bad is also very important. But you have to practice and have to get better and better at this in order to not get lost in the miasma of, the labyrinth of potential rabbit holes you could go down that are diverting you from whatever the real truth is. And there's way more falsities than there are one truths. Yeah. Um, but you mentioned doing a lot of like these spiritual retreats and like learning about this stuff. Like, what are some of the things that you're studying that are helping to arrive at these conclusions?
I've listened to I haven't read, any books for a while because I just find that I learn better through, audiobooks, so I listen to,
Mhm.
like the Kabbalion and, some of the teachings of Blavatsky and Rudolf Steiner. I listen to him a lot,
Sure.
and also, um,
Ledbetter, Yates.
Ledbetter Yeats and Manly P. Hall. I listen
Sure.
to a lot of his, uh
All of whom were universal Freemasons.
yeah, right,
Yeah.
and that's the thing that you can evil forces speak truth
Sure.
sometimes, right?
Do you think
That's the
the
irony or the
Freemasons are the
paradox
evil
of it.
group?
Well, I believe that Freemasons know how to manipulate the human consciousness
Sure.
and don't always do it for the highest and best.
Sure. So does
And
the
the other
Catholic
thing I
Church,
think
by the way.
oh, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, they're right up there. They are they're one of the strongest forces of satanic, like, worship on this planet.
Mhm.
But what I also reckon is that there isn't just one force of one dark force, one evil force. There are lots of evil forces, and they vie for power. They're also lying and cheating and stealing or whatever they're doing to other evil forces in order to gain power and control. I don't fully understand it. It's a much bigger um, game than I can comprehend. But the point is that there are evil forces that do act upon us individually and collectively or through people that
Mhm.
can affect us. And so what I do is I've just established a force field of protection. So I'm surrounded by light and I'm protected from all that's not of the highest and purest light. And that's basically what I do to so that I'm not attacked. Because the other thing that happens is people who do speak out, like you've got a platform now and you're speaking out about these things, you can come under attack for that because all of those forces don't want the truth to come out. So they will maybe, try and attack your health or your communication systems or you know, um, your reach. Even, your family life, whatever, there's so many people who are being shadow banned and,
Mhm.
uh, what else do they call it? Like when people get, basically attacked constantly. There's a word for that, I can't
Sure,
think of
they
it.
try to cancel you or
Yeah, cancel
demonetize
you,
you. They do they
demonetize you, all those things are happening to silence the truth speakers and the truth tellers.
Sure. I'm surprisingly not as scared as I probably should be of that kinda stuff. Like, I I'm sure that I will be, attacked and people will not like what I have to say, or they won't like worse than sometimes in these situations, it's not like what I think or how I feel about something. It's just the fact that I would talk to someone who has a certain belief. Like, why would you even entertain that person or give them a platform to speak? And it's like, because I want to understand them and I want other people to have the opportunity to understand them. Like, I would gladly talk to Adolf fucking Hitler on this podcast if I could, just to know what he thinks. I'm not saying I agree with anything he believes in. If
Right.
anything, I want people to understand how the mind of someone like that works, so that when they hear them again, they don't fall for it.
Yeah.
And if I'm if someone were to, like, be grossly offended by me doing that, all I can say to them is that, maybe you need to, like, listen. Not necessarily to me, but just listen in general more. Like, your one point of view can't be all of it, and if someone else has a wildly different, completely other than your belief system idea, not you don't have to believe it at all, but if you listen to them, you will be challenged to work on your own understanding of what reality is. You will gradually become hopefully stronger in your belief system if your belief system is true. Like, if you put your idea of the cosmos up against every other idea of how things work, and can honestly, without fooling yourself, chip away at the bullshit that you believe and reinforce it with more things that help you to see a higher truth, then you are therefore closer to the truth than you would be if you just I'm just gonna default believe what I believed when I was taught when I was a kid, never question it, and then, okay, well, you could still have that belief system, but it doesn't stand up to scrutiny, then how can you really say that it's true? Um, so I guess I would invite scrutiny. Like, I want people to tell me when I'm wrong. I want people to challenge my beliefs and to make me, like, take a second look at something instead of just being like, "Oh, I think I know everything." Like, no one does,
Yeah, I
especially
like
not
that
me.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's such a just a good way to go through life, not expecting that you know everything and being okay with saying I don't know or I was wrong,
Yeah.
right? What's wrong with that? So just learning and growing here.
Well, something as simple as, I've been taught my whole life that horoscopes are just bullshit and astrology is a pseudoscience because it has no basis in
Right.
reality. And all you have to do is just tell people that a lot. And what I realized one day is, like, I was never really questioning whether it was or wasn't. I was just assuming, like, well, it seems to be universally agreed upon that it's a bunch of crock. So why even spend my time thinking about it? And then, I'm like, I got it in my mind. I'm like, I should just talk to a few of these people and see what I think of what they say. And there are definitely a lot of people out there who are, like, full of shit, or maybe they're like they have a piece of the puzzle, but they don't even see the grand scheme that they're a part of. That's a big part of it too. That's a lot of folks, myself included, where it's, I'm sitting here talking to you today, and this might be like a little microcosm of something that my friend Tim is going to email me about when he hears this and say, like, did you even think about this scale of it? I'm like, oh my gosh, wow, and crazy. Never thought of that.
One of the reasons why astrology has been trivialized and undermined and dismissed is because it's the most ancient science that there is, and it's probably one of the most powerful sources of information that you can have about yourself and what's going on in the world around you is through astrology. Because everything affects everything. So of course we're going to be affected by these massive like masses of mass stars and planets out there and how they move and how they interact with each other.
Sure.
They're all energy. They're all conscious beings, and they how they're positioned and what relationship they have with each other affects us
Well,
individually.
we're talking about people being cut off from the earth. People are cut off from the sky.
Yeah,
Like, you're
and
lucky if you
instead
can see
they're
the moon in some places.
right.
Yeah.
And then we've got this whole, like, you're supposed to look to the stars, the celebrities, that they're the stars, look to them for information, whereas really, it's the actual stars that we need to be looking at for what's happening, and if you study astrology, you can understand what's happening here on the planet where we're at, like in terms of our evolutionary like journey, and also what's happening in terms of the amount of volcanoes or earthquakes that are going on, and the lines it's explained through the astrology. And then if you understand your own personal astrology and your birth chart, you can understand what lessons you're learning, what your strengths and weaknesses are, what why you're feeling a certain way on a certain day. It's I love it.
Sure.
I love astrology, and I would thoroughly recommend, if you're really seriously about about studying about your own um personal personality and your life lessons, then astrology is indispensable.
Yeah. It's just so interesting because all it took was a few generations, really, at least in America, since the '80s for them to just dismantle astrology. Like,
Yeah.
people just don't take it seriously at all anymore. Whereas
But the evil fuckers are using astrology. They use
Mhm.
astrology for all their events because that's how you can get power. You can get personal power, but you also get power for any particular events you want to orchestrate
Right.
by aligning them with the astrology, because there'll be the planetary energies that can give more power to whatever it is that you're creating or doing. Just for instance, if you there's the whole science of the moon. So if you plant on a full moon itself will give the fullness of and more illumination to an experience of the new moons when you plant. So the seeds in the dark, and
Sure.
there are all just those basic types of energy experiences that anyone can understand. Really, why you might want to be checking out what's happening in the heavens.
Well, the people are so quick to dismiss the idea that, other planetary bodies or whatever in the solar system have any effect on us down here, but
I
it's like
know,
the
but
moon
meanwhile, the
literally
sun,
moves the ocean.
right?
The moon
Yeah, it
and
does.
and the sun. People also don't know that the sun has tides as well. Like, there's a tide towards the sun, and then there's a greater tide because it's closer towards the moon, and it is when they are aligned on a new moon or during an eclipse that the tide is the highest over that area and
Makes sense.
lowest on the opposite side of the earth.
Right. They
So
have power, and here we are full of water,
sure, sure,
right? It's just it makes sense, but there's been so much disinformation put out that has to be waded through in order to get to the truth.
sure,
And I have uh, I follow astrology. I follow lots of different astrologers. There are lots of schools of astrology, and all of them have something to offer. That's my understanding, my actual physical and experience that I can certainly um, I can turn to the astrology to help me, to guide me, and to give me peace of mind that there is a plan here, there is order, even though there is also chaos. But there is, we are moving in an upward trajectory. We've just actually the Hindus have divided up time in lots of different ways. But one of the ways is a 24,000 year cycle called a yuga, yuga. And we just finished what's called the Kali Yuga, which was a devolutionary cycle of human consciousness, basically into the darkness there with pretty much everything that we've seen going on. And this guy just published a book. He's studied the yugas, and I think it was like in March we finished that yuga, and now we're starting on an upward cycle of human consciousness, path of human consciousness evolution, and that's called the Dwapara Yuga. So, that by understanding that there are these bigger cycles going on that affect us, it for me, then I'm not so freaked out about, "Oh my god, what the fuck is going on here?" Because it looks batshit crazy. It looks like we really are in the worst possible situation where it could, like, blow at any minute. If
yeah,
who knows what could happen really, but to realize that this is a part of a process. And that the process is clearing out the old ways of being, the old systems, the old like control and fear and control mechanisms. And that's where we are now. We're in the dissolution. of old systems of control. And at some point in time, they are gonna be replaced by systems of organization that do support every human being to be fed, housed, and clothed and living a, you know, a joyful, happy, healthy life.
You're listening to KEEP in the Keep. Whatever happened to the good old days when computer role-playing games spent more time telling great stories than stressing you out with season passes and needless grinding? Call of Seregnar is our effort to bring back the best in RPGs. Play in the immersive world as two friends adventure into a murder mystery that lands them in the middle of a battle between gods. Head over to callofseregnar.com. That's call of SAREGNAR.com for more info, and be sure to wishlist on Steam.
That's how I see it anyway.
And your point of view that you were describing earlier about, like using black magic or symbolic magic, I would just go so far as to just full-blown alchemy to manipulate people. Like, I would encourage people to go Google something like 100 most popular brands or something like that in the world, and then just look at those brands and look at their logos and their names, and notice that they're nearly all something related to, like, an esoteric either symbol or, like, myth that you haven't even thought about. So, like,
or a planet even.
Sure. I mean,
There's
Toyota is Taurus, right? Nike is literally the god Nike from Greek mythology. CVS uses a heart, which is, automatically. Target is the symbol for the sun. And hydrogen, which is the core element, the most basic, lightest element in the universe. And the one, if you will, like they're using that logo. Go look at Apple. Is an apple with a bite taken out of it from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So many of these things.
Right.
Microsoft has the Windows, which is really the cube, which is a very significant, just in Freemasonry alone, very significant symbol. The peacock that you see on whatever they're called, NBC, T-Mobile's T uses it's very specifically like a Knights Templar temple, or T symbol that you're seeing there. And Shell Chemical using the sacred seashell. I could go down this list ad nauseum forever. The more universal your symbol is, whether people think about it or not, they're going to gravitate it towards more because it's familiar to them. And just having like a basic understanding, you don't have to even dig into like secret societies. Just like learn a tarot deck, and this stuff starts to make sense to you. It's the Venn diagram, all of this stuff is just ubiquitous throughout everything that we're seeing plastered all around us, and we don't even see it's there.
So important to ask those sort of questions like, what is this? Why is this? What is it? Why use those symbols? Why use those numbers? Why? Yeah. And just do a bit of research. But you did say before about the rabbit holes.
Sure.
There are countless numbers of rabbit holes. And I reckon the reason that there are is to keep people going down these rabbit holes. And it can cause a lot of distress too, especially when you start finding out about what's really happening to missing children and, what those really black magic rituals really do. So it's important to be aware of that and not get overwhelmed, and do take a break, because it gets pretty fucking dark. I mean, it gets as evil. We can't even comprehend how evil and dark it really gets. But so it's important to be mindful of not. What did they say? Whatever you seek will seek you.
Sure. Yeah.
So don't be seeking the dark forces, because that's not really a safe thing to do.
It's amazing how these things just slide right past us though in our day to day. Like, we don't even realize just the sheer amount of symbolism that we're exposed to that is purposefully supplanting ideas in our mind that are as
Exactly.
in some cases as old as our DNA, if not older. Like the the archetypes that are laid out in most mythologies, in your tarot card, in the Bible, all of this stuff is part of our makeup as human beings, like these stories that we tell and these characters that we encounter throughout our lives. And we talk about them in a personified way, but even if you don't look at it that way, if you just look at it as like at some point in your life, you'll meet a wise old woman who will tell you some wise things that will, set you on a new path to your journey. And then eventually you'll, like the hero's journey, Lord of the Rings kind of shit. People people don't even realize that it's happening to them as it's happening.
Yeah.
Um, I wonder, what how do you separate? You say don't go looking for the bad things. Like how do you know what rabbit holes are good for you to go down, or how do you know what's pointing yourself to the good look like in your day to day?
Just feeling, uh, whatever it is through my intuition,
Uh,
like a gut feeling, or this is something I should listen to. This isn't someone I should be listening to, or not now, whatever. So just like a case by case um, situation where I just get a feeling, and sometimes the feeling is to watch it or listen to it, just to learn more about it. But making sure that I listen to my intuition or my gut feeling first. In fact, that's really how I primarily operate through life, is really to be listening to guidance from my higher self or other beings that I know are on my team, like my husband or my son. I can feel them around me talking to me. But yeah, just to use my intuition as to whether or not I should l- engage with whatever it is, books or speakers or um, whatever.
w- the natural question is, for someone who's been fooled before, like, how were you reasoning when you made the decision to, like, join the group you were in? Like, was that an intuitive thought, or was this more of a trying to make too much sense of something kind of thought? Like, how did you arrive at that?
Well, here's another paradox: is that I was following my intuition and guidance when I joined the cult, joined the group, but I didn't really join a cult. So let's just make that. My understanding was that I had met my guru and I was becoming a part of his ashram. So when I have received, what I've had to do is trust the guidance that I receive, and even if it has led me to some pretty fucking horrible places, to still trust that that was the guidance that I needed to follow in order for me to get where I needed to go on my soul evolutionary journey. That's something that I'm still coming to terms with. That not all guidance that I have got is, go and frolic around on the grass and make a daisy chain.
Sure.
And I fully believe that in order to be handed higher knowledge or given higher knowledge or get downloads for, the higher knowledge, I feel personally I have had to prove myself as a solid vessel for receiving higher information. So
Mm,
I've been tested
sure.
as to how I'm going to handle a situation. Am I going to, keep my faith, or am I just going to turn my back on God and get all nasty and mean and turn into a murderer?
Sure.
So through the tests, as much as I've got angry and felt that I was a victim and whatever, I've stayed true to the fact that my focus has been on serving God, and I'm by following the guidance that I get, that I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing in the right place, doing the right thing, and being of service. So
Sure.
I just I've just followed my intuition, and I still do that. And
So,
as
like,
I followed it more and more, then becomes clearer, and I feel and I'm more trusting of that. And it's not just to get the guidance, but then you also have to follow it.
right.
That's another thing about any, even in meditation too, if you're getting information, it's all one thing to say, "Oh, I heard this and I heard that," but then what did you do with it? Did you
So
just hear it
maybe
or
maybe you going through all of this suffering that you've been through was what you needed in order to arrive at the point where you're at now, where you're trying to educate other people about.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
There's a quote that "Suffering's the crucible for wisdom,"
Mm.
and that's my experience. I mean, I've still got a shit ton to learn. I'm still looking at life through a pinhole and have a human, limitation to my understanding of reality, but it's definitely much bigger than it was, and it continues to expand.
What would you say, like, to your younger self? Like, if you could go back and talk to you, like, the day you were about to walk into this Ishram situation for the first time.
Oh, well, my human self would say, "Don't. Just don't do it. Don't move there. Don't go there. Don't take that step." But from a soul perspective, it just had something that I needed to do, I suppose. Maybe that's me justifying it or whatever, I don't know, but I know now how I am now and being free of suffering, that whatever I experienced up until just a few years ago, the living hell
Mm.
was all part of the experiences that I needed to have to get free of suffering. And
When did
I really am here as a spiritual being. It's kind of a solo journey. I feel sometimes very selfish and self-absorbed, and maybe I am, but I'm taking this sojourn here on earth in this body very seriously.
Sure. How long ago was it when you left?
16 years ago.
Okay. Do Are you
And I
still in contact with anyone from the group?
No,
No.
I'm not, and I'm in contact with people who've left the group,
Sure.
and there aren't that many who are willing to speak out about it because so many people got really damaged by this guy. One of his things that he did was to convince the men in the cult that they needed to explore their sexuality, and of course that was with him, and he convinced many of them that they're gay, and so that ended up being, a lot of relationships got broken up, marriages, there's a lot of the heartbreak. All this was happening out of my knowledge and behind my back. So while I was in a celibate marriage, he was fucking around with the guys in the cult, the boys in the cult, and as well as on Tinder and Grindr and all that. So, it's best that I don't have anything to do with him or any of his cult members anymore, just because of any I just don't want his, energy or him to know really about me. I'd rather have that connection be completely clear because he's an extremely evil and demonic force, and I don't know what he gets up to in you know, his quiet time, but I'm convinced that he has demons within him that run the show.
So they're still out there, like, they're still doing this.
Oh, yeah, he's still running the cult. He's got the same cult members that he's been running the scam on that pay him, 10% of their gross income. That's how he keeps his, cult business running. And he's, still raping the men and mind raping the rest of the cult. And I'm at this point, the main whistleblower, and I'm not gonna devote all my time and energy to exposing him. But I am speaking out because cults are so prevalent, and people need to understand a bit more about how it's easy to be under mind control
Mm.
because it is so insidious and evil. It's not always obvious.
Sure. Where, like, how many people at any given time are we talking about part of this organization?
I haven't been involved for a while, but there was probably at one point, like he had a couple of cult homes in LA, and then he's also had a cult home in Melbourne. and Sydney and Tasmania, maybe about like 50
Okay.
at some point. Not he's not It's interesting because it's not a very big cult. He's kinda under the wire there. Doesn't need a whole lot of numbers, but he's just got enough people that can, fund his promiscuous lifestyle and allow him to have his trips, travel, and all that. So he doesn't really need a whole lot of people. He just needs people who are, uh, devoted and earning money.
Gotcha. So at one point in time, you really believed in his message, though.
Yeah, I believed he was my guru and that he was going to guide me.
But
Yeah,
did you
I
believe that
did
he
believe
was
that.
like the second
Honestly,
coming of
I felt
Christ?
really uncomfortable about that because I was married to him. So if he's this guru, then it meant that I was something as well. Like I'm supposed to be the divine mother or some bullshit. And that always felt really uncomfortable to me. And the other thing was I saw him every day. And I remember thinking, if he's the second coming, we're fucked
Mm,
because he's a piece of shit. The way he treated people and
sure.
just the way he lied and bullshitted and just was so self-obsessed. So Uh, I was just to be honest, I was batshit crazy through the all those cult years. So there was probably a time where if you'd asked me, did I believe he was the second coming, I probably would have said yes.
Sure. Um, it's very interesting. Do you believe that there will be a second coming?
I believe that the second coming is it's a consciousness
Sure.
and it's already coming. It's already here. And it's the consciousness, it's Christ consciousness, God consciousness. It's what you have because you can see a higher picture. You can see more of reality. That's what it is. It's just a higher consciousness. It's not a one person. Yeah, it's not one person.
Yeah. No, I find that interesting, and I've definitely dug into the Gospels a lot and talked to people about this who are smarter than I am. But Jesus doesn't ever really say I. He's not like the Terminator saying I would be back or whatever. Like I, Jesus of Nazareth, will return. Nor did was it very clear when Elijah and Isaiah were talking about what we now call the time of Christ. Also, weren't necessarily saying things that the literal way that people interpret them now. So for all of the folks out there who are truly like waiting on a guy in a robe to come down from the sky on a horse with a sword, um, I wonder if they could be convinced to look at what we have now and say, as you're saying, that it's already here, like that's already happening.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that's part of the psyop is to make it about one person. So people are sort of waiting.
yeah.
He's going to come. He'll be here, whatever, rather than doing something or, taking full responsibility for oneself
If
or
people are
realizing
looking
that,
for a person,
yeah,
yeah.
looking for a savior
Mm,
rather than being a savior or feeling already saved or whatever it is. I don't fully understand. I'm not very good with all that religious stuff, but
mm,
th- even just the idea of focusing on it's one person who's going to save the world. It means that everybody else is just going to wait, like for that one person. Whereas there's what we can do a lot now. We need to
mm.
be doing some active, um, like contribution towards a better world, and whether that's just being a kind, helpful human being who's peaceful and you know non-combative on a daily basis to doing a podcast and speaking to lots of people and sharing the information out. There are so many ways that we can embrace this Christ consciousness and participate in this second coming that yeah that we can do every day in some simple ways.
In your book, you were very clear. You do not think that we live in a computer simulation, right? But
No,
you said,
listen.
yeah.
People will say it's a simulation, and we've got the Hindus talking about Maya and the illusion and all that. And I get it. We are spiritual beings in a human body having a spiritual experience.
Mm,
And yes, this may not be real, but it's as real as it fucking gets right now for me.
mm,
And I feel like if we talk about it or reality being a simulation, it's another way of just like that whole second coming thing where people can like not be responsible for what's happening. Oh, it's only a simulation, or it doesn't really matter, or whatever.
Yeah,
I can't really
nihilism.
affect it because it's all an illusion. Yeah, I think it's better that we're right here, right now, fully embodied. Having this like fully divine human experience, and that's what is right now. That's all we've got. That's our reality.
Yeah. It's very tempting to say, we wouldn't know if we were. Like, and
What's that?
it's tempting to say that we wouldn't know if we were in a simulation, like, it would
Right,
be
right.
that good, right? Like, so if we can accept without material evidence, right, that the world we live in is somewhat of I wouldn't even say an illusion, just like a limited viewpoint of whatever's going on in the greater reality, and that there are higher and lower dimensions, and there are things acting on us that we don't understand. Um, and we give those things names, we personify them, we call them angels and spirits and all that stuff. But I mean, if you were a character in a video game and I programmed you to think that to be true, and I made things within the video game that caused that to be self-evident, and just never let you know that you're in a game, you wouldn't know. And that's one of the interesting things about creating simulations is, in a way, and I'm not calling myself any kind of creator or god or whatever. I'm just saying that you are creating like a tiny little universe where in which you decide the parameters of what the laws of physics are. Um, and all of it's just, we in a lot of spiritual teachings they talk about like consciousness is not localized, right? It's all around us and it's somewhere else at the same time. In a game, the consciousness of the player is in your head, your remote doing that from somewhere else. This is an avatar on the screen for you, or of the non-playable characters in the game, or really everything else, every other system that controls what goes on in the game. Their consciousness is localized in a computer chip where it's not even really localized. It's just a bunch of code flying through, making calculations around them. And occasionally you get what's interesting is like glitches. You get things that happen that aren't supposed to happen, either from some mistake or some hardware issue. Um, and there are people who talk about like glitches in the matrix as we see them here. There's like the if you want to go crazy, like the Mandela effect, and just things that don't seem to make sense or add up. I've gotten to the point where I wonder, did the expanse of the universe exist before we were able to get to the point where we could observe that it is expansive, right? So, like, you think about people growing up at a time when it was like the Earth was the center of the universe, and then there was the sun and the moon and the stars, and that was that. And then was that all there all along? Or did consciousness grow as we grew the ability to expand our consciousness? Like, did the moons around Jupiter exist before Galileo put his telescope up and looked at them? And when we talk about things like quantum mechanics, it's enough to drive someone crazy just to think about that. Like, did you exist today before I spoke to you? I don't know. I'll never be able to prove it. It could be that the designer of my game added a DLC in today that was talk to Isabella Young, and then that was just my new reality. I would never even know that it was inserted there, and neither would the player in the game.
It's wild to think about.
I know.
What do you think? What's your take on this reality?
I'm I'm inclined to believe that physics is way more complicated than or we have the arrogance to say that we know, right? So I'm really, really inclined to think that time we experience in a linear fashion, but in the grand scheme of things, if you were existing outside of time, if you were a 5-dimensional being instead of a 3-dimensional or 4-dimensional being, that it would just look like a static image to you.
Mhm.
Um, so it makes sense to me, philosophically at least, that we live in a much bigger, broader thing than what you or I could say exists within these 3 rooms.
Mhm.
So when someone says like this desk is real, but science and religion both agree that this desk isn't real. Like, this desk is my understanding of whatever this really is. Like, psychology has come a long way in terms of just saying, like, I experience a solid wooden object that I understand only because I have words to describe solid wooden an object and have some idea of what that means to me in my head. And when I feel it, when I touch it, I have expectations that I'm mapping onto it, right? But, you know, in just 4 dimensions, this desk is existing, it doesn't exist, and it's in many different places all at the same time. Right, so it's everywhere that it's ever been from its motion around the Earth, from its motion around this room, to the Earth's rotation around the sun, to the sun's rotation around the galaxy, to the galaxy's rotation around whatever's at the center of this universe. All of that, all at the same time, is this disk. From when it was stardust to whatever it will be at the end, if there even is an end. But for me, my limited perception is that it's a disk. And that applies to every particle in the disk. Um, so it doesn't make sense just with that little bit of information to conclude that there's nothing. There's nothing greater than us, or there's nothing lesser than us. Star Trek had this amazing episode where they run into a group of 2-dimensional beings. And it's like, they're not even aware that we as a 3-dimensional being exist. They're just moving in a linear fashion through space.
They were just cardboard cutouts?
I mean, they weren't even people. They were imperceptible. Like, they're just a stream on a 2-dimensional plane in the greater plane of space.
Oh, wow.
Going from point A to point B. And they're conscious within the realm that they could be conscious, but we're not aware of them and they're not aware of us. But things that the ship was doing with its sensors were affecting their ability to cross a certain threshold to go where they're going.
All right.
And I don't know if that's really a thing that happens, but it's a great thought exercise to, like, okay, so what does a being that's 1 dimension above us perceive us like? And above that.
Right.
And it just physics alone is suggesting as much as 10, 11, maybe more dimensions where we
Right.
only even think about 4, much less experience time. I guess that was the answer to your question. Is I have a lot more questions than I thought I had when I first started diving into this stuff. Certainty only comes with, like, overlap, I guess. The more different things that you take in, where the lines intersect is where I, like, try to investigate.
Like that.
Mm. What advice do you have for people out there who are, whether they're in a cult or an abusive relationship or just living a lie based on the society's parameters for them? Like, what would you say to them is the first step to get it, to even notice what they're dealing with?
The first step is to ask, like, what the heck is going on here, and then be really courageous to answer that.
Mhm.
So if you start to question about someone you're in a relationship with, whether they're being truthful or controlling or whatever, just to really be really honest and look for the answers about a group. What is it about this group? Why are they doing what they're doing? Why do I have to do this? Be questioning what's really going on. And the same with the government situation. Just to ask questions, not believe everything that you're told, and then have the courage to find the answers, whether that's, research or through intuition or meditation or whatever,
Mhm.
and then make an assessment after you've got more information about what you should do. Because for some people, it isn't reasonable to get out and start again. So then you have to learn how to protect yourself, or, not be manipulated. But for some situations, then you do have to get out and get free and clear in order to uh, heal. And, yeah, that to get out. But my main advice for everyone is always the same, and that's just because all those situations that you're describing, like, for most people, we're actually in trauma most of the time, even if we're not in combat. Like, you've obviously been seriously traumatized by your experiences. So this living day to day can be traumatic, especially taking in information you were saying before about how we're not meant to have all this information. We're not. We're not meant to know all the terrors and horrors and awful things that are going on in the world. It's extremely traumatic for us. So the best way is to minimize that. So, don't be taking all that information in, and then go outside and be in nature, be still, be relaxed, create a space that you can go to and just be there, away from all this fucking chaotic, bullshit. And so create some space for yourself away from the trauma, where you can start to relax and to think clearly, and to come back to a peaceful, balanced state. Because without that, then you're really just continuing to, like, step on rakes and trip over, yourself. You really
Sure.
gotta create a space to separate yourself from the trauma before you can start to heal. Anyway, that's what worked for me, just spending a lot of time, doing things outside, going on walks, walking the dog, do gardening, growing food, um, whatever it is, walking on the beach, going to a park, picking up trash, just all being human,
Sure.
doing human stuff, dancing, singing, playing, being with other people, cooking, uh, creating art, playing music, listening to music. Just be doing whatever it is that's as human as possible, as much as possible. And I think that's the best place to start, to then heal.
I think I'm gonna go play in my garden for a few hours after this. So,
Yeah, I heard you got some onions growing there.
oh no, not this season. I have tomatoes. I have herbs, like all kinds of herbs. A few different pepper plants. Well, no, my cabbage died. So romaine lettuce. I think we have a cantaloupe just as an experiment, just to see what happens. Lots of. I picked a bunch of cucumbers yesterday. So we're gonna be
So
making
good.
pickles.
Yeah, I just made some refrigerated pickles. They're so good.
Mm.
Because we can grow food that's specifically medicine for us. There's a series of books called The Ringing Cedars,
Mhm.
which bring forth teachers from this a Russian woman who lived in the taiga there. She was just uh, uh, she was a witch, let's face it. She knew a lot of stuff about a lot of plants and animals, talked to plants.
Sure.
And she's given this method of planting seeds where you put them under your tongue and for a certain amount of time, and then when the moon is in a certain phase, plant the seeds, and that plant will grow with the information that will specifically optimize your health. And I believe that actually that I can communicate that information to the plants anyway.
Mhm.
And that's why I grow sprouts and make my own kombucha and all that, so that I'm communicating to these plants by, watering them, talking to them, and they'll provide me with the medicine that I need.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a wonderful thing for everyone to do. Like, even if you take nothing else from this conversation, grow something. Like, go get some
Exactly,
seeds
grow
and just
something.
and even if it's in your flat, like next to a vent in your shower or whatever, just observe a plant go from a seed to a something you can eat, and then insert that new knowledge that you gained from that into other things that you do in your life. And then maybe one day you'll get to the point where it's like a little person, you do the same stuff. And it's just mind blowing to see that process. It's so eye
It
opening.
is. It is.
Um, thank you so
Beautiful.
much for being brave to open up about a lot of this stuff. I know it's got to have been really, really difficult for you. Where can people
Well,
get a
thank
hold of
you.
you?
I have a website,
Mhm.
feelingbetternaturally.love,
Yeah.
and a YouTube channel, Feeling Better Naturally, and a Substack,
Mhm.
Feeling Better Naturally. And I have my books are on Amazon. The one that I just released is called New Human of New Earth, and my name's Isabella Young, so you can find that on Amazon. And I thoroughly recommend that. It's a massively long book. It's 825 pages, which is ridiculous,
Yeah.
but it's got so much information about the technologies that we have in our body, and the many of the technologies that are in nature and also in our spiritual nature that can help us, live a pain-free, joyful life.
Yeah, I'll make
So
sure
yeah,
that
that's
all your links and your books, the Amazon pages and everything are in the article with the episode if for people who wanna check it out.
thank you. And
Mhm,
thank you for giving me this opportunity to be a guest on your podcast,
mhm.
Tyler. And I specifically thank you for your questions and the wealth of experience that you bring to these conversations. Because what I particularly like about you've had this wealth of experience, and then you've had your like a your expansion of consciousness into the whole new perspective of reality.
Mhm.
And so you can bring that information with you, and that's very enriching for for me, because I've learned a lot from you today, and also for your listeners, and then for you as a partner and a parent. So good job on being a good human being, making the world a better place. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you, and the feeling is mutual. So whenever you have a new book or anything at all you wanna talk about, just shoot me an email. We'll make it happen again.
Okay, thank you. And thanks to everybody for listening. I hope that the information has been beneficial.
Thank you for listening to this wonderful episode of In the Keep podcast. I've been your host, the Motherlode, Tyler Brandon, the guy with the microphone who says stuff after these really long interviews to you directly. Thank you for listening. Thank you to everyone who supports us. There's all kinds of ways to do so on our website, inthekeep.com. Make sure you're actually checking out the episode notes. A lot of the times when I'm putting the links to all these books together and everything, so that if there's anything you want to check out or look for the author, or you just want to read the transcript or skim through the chapters, it's all there in the app. It's also on our website. So, yeah. This was a mind trip, though, this episode. Can you imagine the circumstances? Can you imagine if that was your life? What would you do? What would you think? How would you make sense of stuff? I thought Isabella was very brave to, just be as raw and honest as she was. So, yeah, if you like this one, make sure you're telling friends. I love you. God love you. Till next time, stay in the keep.
Hi, I'm Ben, host of the Field and Foley podcast. Every episode I sit down with incredible guests, not just sound designers, field recorders or musicians, but experts in everything about audio. We explore the creative process behind the sounds that shape our favorite games, films and experiences. Whether you're an audio professional or just someone who loves great sound, Field and Foley offers deep dives, behind-the-scenes stories and insights you won't hear anywhere else.